Deep in the foggy village of Willoughby, a wealthy squire is found dead, poisoned, with a strange pentagram beside him. The villagers blame Martha Greystone, a lonely herbalist they call a witch, and fear sparks a dangerous mob. Enter Hercule Poirot, the world's greatest detective, and his loyal friend Captain Hastings. As whispers of curses and secrets swirl, Poirot uncovers a web of blackmail, forbidden love, and greed tied to a land deal that threatens the village. With time running out and the mob closing in, can Poirot's sharp mind unravel the truth before an innocent woman pays the price? Dive into a gripping tale of mystery, where fear hides the killer, and only reason reveals the truth. Chapter 1. The Whispering Village. The train rattled along the tracks, puffing clouds of steam into the chilly autumn air. Hercule Poirot sat by the window, his small, neat moustache twitching as he watched the green hills of the English countryside roll by. His sharp eyes, bright like a hawk's, took in every detail the way the trees bent in the wind. The patches of mist hanging low over the fields, the little stone walls crisscrossing the land. He adjusted his perfectly pressed suit and leaned back, his hands folded over his round belly. "Mon ami," he said, turning to his friend Captain Hastings, who sat across from him, nose buried in a newspaper. "This journey to the countryside, it is good for the soul, no. The fresh air, the quiet it, will do wonders for my little grey cells." Hastings lowered his paper, his friendly face breaking into a grin. "Poirot, you and your little grey cells. I thought you'd be bored without a mystery to solve. This is supposed to be a holiday. You know, a break from all your detective work." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A holiday, yes, but the mind of Hercule Poirot, it never rests. Even in a quiet village, there is always something to uncover. People, they carry their secrets everywhere, like snails carry their shells." Hastings chuckled, shaking his head. "You're impossible. Willoughby's just a sleepy little place. Nothing ever happens there except gossip and tea parties." "We shall see, Hastings," Poirot said, tapping his temple. "We shall see." The train slowed, its whistle piercing the air, and soon they stepped onto the platform of Willoughby Station. The village was tucked in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills and thick woods. Stone cottages with thatched roofs dotted the landscape, their chimneys puffing smoke. A church spire poked above the trees, and a narrow river wound through the fields, sparkling in the weak sunlight. It looked peaceful, almost too perfect, like a painting in a storybook. But as Poirot and Hastings walked toward the village in where they'd booked rooms for their week-long stay, Poirot's sharp eyes noticed something. The people they passed, in muddy boots, women carrying baskets, children playing by the road, seemed tense. Their smiles were tight, their glances quick and nervous. Whispers followed the two strangers, soft as the rustle of leaves, but heavy with meaning. "Hastings," Poirot murmured, "do you feel it? The air here, it is not so calm as it seems. There is fear in this village. Fear." Hastings frowned, looking around. "It's just a quiet place, Poirot. Maybe they're not used to outsiders." Nan, Poirot said, waving a gloved hand. "It is more than that. The eyes, they do not lie. These people, they are watching something or someone." They reached the Willoughby in a cozy building, with ivy climbing its walls and a creaky sign swinging in the breeze. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread. The innkeeper, Mrs. Dobbs, a plump woman with rosy cheeks and a nervous smile, greeted them warmly but kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting trouble. "Welcome, gentlemen," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. You must be Mr. Poirot and Mr. Hastings. Your rooms are ready upstairs, nice and cozy, with a view of the river. Merci, madame, Poirot said, bowing slightly. We look forward to a restful stay. Tell me, is Willoughby always so quiet? Mrs. Dobbs hesitated, her smile faltering. Oh, it's a peaceful place, sir, most of the time. Just, well, there's been some talk lately. Nothing to bother you, I'm sure. Talk. Poirot's eyebrows rose, his voice gentle but curious. What kind of talk, if I may ask? She looked around, lowering her voice. Just silly rumours, sir, about a woman in the village, Martha Greystone. Some say she's, well, a witch. But it's nonsense, of course. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Hastings raised an eyebrow. A witch, in this day and age? Oh, you'd be surprised what folks believe, Mrs. Dobbs said, bustling behind the counter. Now, let me show you to your rooms. Poirot and Hastings followed her up the creaky stairs, but Poirot's mind was already at work. A witch. In a modern English village. It was absurd, yet the fear in Mrs. Dobbs' eyes was real. Something was wrong in Willoughby, and Poirot's curiosity was piqued. Their rooms were small but comfortable, with soft beds, lace curtains, and fireplaces, crackling with warmth. After unpacking, they went downstairs for tea. The inn's parlour was filled with locals, farmers, shopkeepers, and a few women knitting by the fire. The room buzzed with quiet chatter, but it stopped when Poirot and Hastings entered. All eyes turned to them, sizing them up. Poirot smiled politely, tipping his hat. Bonsoir, mes amis. I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my friend, Captain Hastings. We are here for a little holiday. The tension eased slightly, and a few people nodded back. A tall man with a bushy beard stood up, offering his hand. Names. John Poirot, he said. I run the village shop. Welcome to Willoughby. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, Poirot said, shaking his hand. It is a charming village, though I hear there is much talk of witches. The room went silent again. Harrow's face tightened, and a woman by the fire dropped her knitting needles with a clatter. Finally, Harrow cleared his throat. Just foolish gossip, sir. Some folks blame Martha Greystone for every bit of bad luck, cows not giving milk, crops failing, that sort of thing. It's nothing serious. But Poirot noticed the glances exchanged among the villagers. They were hiding something. He sipped his tea, his eyes darting from face to face, reading their expressions like a book. That evening, Poirot and Hastings walked through the village to stretch their legs. The sun had set, and the streets were dark, lit only by flickering lanterns. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. As they passed the church, they saw a group of people gathered outside, their voices low and angry. What's going on? Hastings whispered. Poirot held up a hand, signalling him to stay quiet. They stepped closer, hiding behind a hedge. In the lantern light, they saw Vicar James, the village priest, standing on the church steps. He was a thin man with sharp features and a loud voice. This evil must stop, he was saying, his arms raised. Martha Greystone brings darkness to our village. Her potions, her strange ways, they're the work of the devil. The crowd murmured in agreement, some shouting, "Burn the witch." Poirot's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary gossip, this was a witch hunt. Mon Dieu, he whispered to Hastings. This is dangerous. Fear makes people blind, and blindness leads to terrible things. They slipped away before anyone noticed them, heading back to the inn. Hastings was shaken. Poirot, this is madness. They can't seriously believe in witches. Belief, Hastings, is a powerful thing, Poirot said, and fear makes it stronger. We must learn more about this Martha Greystone. The next morning, the village was buzzing with news. Squire Thomas Blackwood, the wealthiest man in Willoughby, had been found dead in his manor house. Poirot and Hastings heard about it over breakfast as Mrs. Dobbs rushed into the parlour, her face pale. "It's terrible, gentlemen," she gasped. "Squire Blackwood murdered in his own home. They found him this morning, cold as stone, with no mark on him. The village is saying it's the witch's curse." Hastings nearly choked on his toast. "Murdered, are you sure?" "That's what they're saying," Mrs. Dobbs said, wringing her hands. "The constable's up at the manor now." "Oh, it's a dark day for Willoughby." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "A murder, you say, and no mark on the body? Most curious. Hastings, we must see this for ourselves." They hurried to Blackwood Manor, a grand stone house on the edge of the village, surrounded by tall oaks and a Rottian fence. A small crowd had gathered outside, whispering and pointing. The constable, a stout man named Mr. Gibbs, was trying to keep them back. "Stay back, all of you," Gibbs shouted. "This is police business." Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Monsieur Gibbs, I am Hercule Poirot, a detective of some reputation. My friend Captain Hastings and I wish to offer our assistance. May we see the scene of the crime?" Gibbs looked skeptical but nodded. "Heard of you, Mr. Poirot. If you think you can help, come along. But it's a grim sight." Inside the manor, the air was heavy with the smell of old wood and wax. Black's body lay in his study, slumped in a leather chair by the fireplace. He was a large man, with grey hair and a stern face, now frozen in death. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. There were no cuts, no bruises, no blood, just a faint smell of something bitter in the air. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands careful not to touch anything. He studied Blackwood's face, his hands, his clothes. Then he turned to the desk, where papers were scattered. Among them was a strange drawing, a five-pointed star, a pentagram scratched onto a piece of parchment. "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. "Hastings, do you see this? A pentagram, a symbol some associate with witchcraft." Hastings shivered. "You don't think it's really a curse, do you?" Poirot gave him a sharp look. "A curse? Nan, mon ami. This is the work of a human hand, not a witch. But someone wishes us to think otherwise." Gibbs scratched his head. "The village is already blaming Martha Greystone. They say she put a spell on him. Blackwood was one of the loudest against her. You called her a danger to the village. Is that so?" Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. "And where is this Madame Greystone now?" "Lives in a cottage by the woods," Gibbs said. "Folks are scared to go near it. Say it's haunted." "Then we shall visit her," Poirot said firmly. "But first, tell me about Squire Blackwood. Who were his friends, his enemies?" Gibbs shrugged. "He was a big man in Willoughby, beyond half the land, sat on the village council. Not everyone liked him, mind you. He was tough on tenants, raised rents, and there was talk of him selling land to outsiders. Made some folks angry, like Mr. Carver, who used to be his friend but fell out with him years ago." "Carver," Poirot repeated, filing the name away. "And who else?" "Well, there's Lady Eleanor, his wife," Gibbs said. "She's upstairs, beside herself with grief. Then there's Vicar James, who didn't like Blackwood much, thought he was too worldly. And Mr. Harrow, the shopkeeper, wasn't happy about the land sale either. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Mercy, Monsieur Gibbs. We will speak with these people. But first, the scene must be examined carefully. For the next hour, Poirot moved through the study like a cat, quiet and precise. He checked the windows locked, the fireplace cold, the books on the shelves, nothing unusual. He found a glass on the desk, half filled with a dark liquid that smelled faintly of almonds. He sniffed it carefully, then sealed it in a handkerchief. Poison, perhaps, he said to Hastings. We must have this tested. Hastings looked uneasy. Poison. That's awful, Poirot. Who would do such a thing? Someone clever, Poirot said. Someone who hides behind the villagers' fear of witches. Come, Hastings, let us meet this so-called witch. They left the manor and walked toward the woods, where Martha Greystone's cottage stood. The path was overgrown, and the air grew colder as they approached. The cottage was small, with a sagging roof and herbs hanging to dry outside. It looked lonely, but not frightening. Poirot knocked on the door. After a moment, it creaked open, and a woman stood there. Martha Greystone was older, with grey hair tied back and sharp blue eyes. Her face was lined, but kind, and she held herself with quiet strength. Good day, Poirot said, tipping his hat. I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We wish to speak with you about Squire Blackwood. Martha's eyes narrowed. I heard he's dead, and I suppose the village thinks I did it. Some do, Poirot said honestly. But I do not believe in witches, madame. I believe in facts. May we come in? She hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the cottage was warm and smelled of herbs. Shelves were lined with jars of dried plants, and a pot simmered on the fire. Martha offered them tea, which Poirot politely declined. I make remedies, she said, gesturing to the jars. For colds, aches, sleepless nights. Blackwood came to me sometimes. He had trouble sleeping. I gave him a tonic, nothing more. Did he have enemies? Poirot asked. Martha laughed bitterly. Plenty. He was a hard man, always wanting. More land, more money. He didn't care who he hurt. But I didn't kill him. I just want to be left alone. Poirot studied her, his eyes sharp but kind. Mercy, Madame Greystone. We will trouble you no more for now. As they walked back to the inn, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the village. Hastings was quiet, his mind full of questions. Do you think she's telling the truth, Poirot? I think, Poirot said, that truth is like a puzzle. We have only a few pieces now, but soon, mon ami, we will see the whole picture. And it will not be a picture of witches, but of human greed, fear, or perhaps revenge. Back at the inn, the parlour was alive with talk. The villagers were gathered, their voices loud with anger and fear. It's her, a woman cried. Martha Greystone killed the squire. We can't let her curse us all. Poirot stood in the doorway, his small figure commanding attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. I am Hercule Poirot, and I promise you I will find the truth behind this murder. But you must not act in fear. Fear blinds us. Let my little grey cells do their work. The crowd quieted, but their eyes were still wary. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. The truth, Hastings, is often hidden beneath the noise of fear. Tomorrow we begin our hunt not for witches, but for a killer. Chapter 2. The Witch's Shadow. The morning sun peeked through the heavy mist that clung to Willoughby like a damp blanket. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of his room at the Willoughby in his small hands clasped behind his back, his neat moustache perfectly trimmed. He stared out at the village, where smoke curled from chimneys and the distant church bell tolled softly. The air felt heavy, not just with fog but with something else: fear, suspicion, a darkness that hung over the cobblestone streets. "Mon ami Poirot," said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was struggling to knot his tie in front of a small mirror. "This village, it is like a pot of soup left too long on the fire. It simmers, ready to boil over, and we must find out what stirs it." Hastings fumbled with his tie, his face puzzled. "You mean the murder, Poirot, or all this witch nonsense? Honestly, I can't believe people are still talking about curses." In 1925, Poirot's eyes twinkled, but his voice was serious. "Nonsense, perhaps, but powerful. Fear makes people see shadows where there are none, and in those shadows, Hastings, a killer, hides." They headed downstairs for breakfast. The inn's parlour warm with the smell of fresh bread and bacon. Mrs. Dobbs bustled about, her cheeks flushed, her eyes darting nervously to the door every time it creaked. The other guests, a few farmers, a shop girl, and an old man with a pipe, whispered over their tea, their voices low but urgent. Words like witch and curse floated through the air, sharp as thorns. Poirot sipped his coffee, his sharp eyes watching everyone. "Mrs. Dobbs," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "tell me more about Squire Blackwood. What kind of man was he?" Mrs. Dobbs paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, he was important, sir. Owned half the village land houses, even part of the mill. Folks respected him, but, well, not everyone liked him. He could be hard, raising rents, pushing people off their farms if they couldn't pay." "Enemies, then?" Poirot asked, leaning forward. She hesitated, glancing at the other guests. "I wouldn't say enemies, exactly. But Mr. Carver, his old friend, hadn't spoken to him in years, some old fight over money. And Vicar James. Thought Blackwood was too proud, always arguing with him about the church. Then there's Lady Eleanor, his wife. She's sweet, but they say she and the squire fought sometimes." Poirot nodded, his mind filing away every word. "And this Martha Greystone, the so-called witch, did Blackwood speak against her?" "Oh yes," Mrs. Dobbs said, lowering her voice. "He called her a danger, said her herbs and potions were evil. He wanted her gone from Willoughby." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. "Merci, madame." After breakfast, Poirot and Hastings set out for Blackwood Manor to examine the crime scene again. The village was awake now, but the streets felt uneasy. Children stopped playing to stare, and women hurried past with their shawls pulled tight. A group of men stood outside the pub, muttering about Martha Greystone and the curse that killed the squire. "Hastings," Poirot said as they walked, "do you notice how fear spreads? Like a fire, it jumps from one heart to another. We must be careful, or this village will burn itself down." The manor loomed ahead, its grey stone walls cold and silent. Constable Gibbs was waiting at the gate, his round face grim. "Morning. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings. I hope you've got some ideas, because the village is in an uproar. They're all pointing fingers at Martha Greystone." "Fingers point easily," Poirot said, "but they do not always find the truth. Let us see the study again." Inside, the manor was quiet, the air thick with the smell of old books and polished wood. They climbed the wide staircase to Blackwood's study, where the squire's body had been taken away, but the room still felt heavy, as if death lingered. The leather chair where Blackwood had died was pushed against the desk, and the fireplace was cold. Papers were scattered across the desk, and the strange pentagram drawing still lay there, its sharp lines scratched in black ink. Poirot moved like a cat, his small steps silent, his eyes darting over every detail. He knelt by the chair, sniffing the air, then ran a gloved finger along the armrest. "No blood, no struggle," he said. "The squire died quietly, perhaps without knowing." Hastings shivered. "It's creepy, Poirot. No marks, no wounds, just that awful smell of almonds." "You think it's poison, perhaps," Poirot said, standing. He picked up the glass from the desk, the one with the dark liquid, now wrapped in his handkerchief. "This we must test. But there is more here, Hastings. Look at this desk papers, everywhere, yet one stands out." He held up the pentagram, drawing, turning it in the light. "This symbol, it is meant to frighten, to make us think of witches. But why leave it here? To point to Madame Greystone, or to hide something else?" Hastings frowned. "You think someone planted it?" "I think," Poirot said, "that a clever mind is at work. Come, let us search further." They spent the next hour combing the study. Poirot checked the windows still locked, with no sign of forced entry. He examined the bookshelves, pulling out volumes to see if anything was hidden. Behind one book, he found a small leather diary, its pages yellowed and filled with Blackwood's tight handwriting. "Look at this, Hastings," Poirot said, flipping through the diary. "Names, dates, sums of money. It seems the squire kept secrets of his own." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "What does it say?" "It is not clear," Poirot said, his brow furrowed. "The names are in code initials, perhaps. J.H., E, B, V, J, and sums of money beside them. Debts, bribes. We must learn more." They tucked the diary away and continued their search. Under the desk, Poirot found a tiny glass vial, no bigger than his thumb, with a few drops of liquid inside. It smelled faintly herbal, not like the almond-scented glass. "Another clue," he said, sealing it in a cloth. "Perhaps this is one of Madame Greystone's tonics." As they left the study, they heard a soft sob from down the hall. Following the sound, they found Lady Eleanor Blackwood in a sitting room, her face pale, her dark hair falling loose from its pins. She was a tall woman, elegant even in grief, but her eyes were red from crying. "Madame Blackwood," Poirot said, bowing. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We are sorry for your loss. May we speak with you?" She nodded, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. "I don't know what happened," she said, her voice trembling. "Thomas was fine. Last night, we had dinner, talked about the village, then he went to his study. I heard nothing, no shouts, no struggle. This morning, he was gone." "Did he have enemies?" Poirot asked gently. Lady Eleanor hesitated. "He was a strong man, Mr. Poirot. Not everyone liked his ways. He was planning to sell some land to a company from London, and that upset people. Mr. Harrow, the shopkeeper, and others who rent from us. And Mr. Carver, his old friend, never forgave him for some business deal years ago." "And Martha Greystone?" Poirot asked. She looked away. Thomas thought she was trouble. He said her potions were dangerous, that she was unnatural. He wanted her out of Willoughby. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "Merci, madame. We will trouble you no more for now." As they left the manor, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, isn't she?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. Grief hides many things, Hastings, sorrow, guilt, or secrets. We must keep watching. Their next stop was the village square, where a crowd had gathered outside the church. Vicar James stood on the steps, his thin face flushed with anger, his voice booming. "This is no accident," he shouted. "Squire Blackwood's death is a sign. Martha Greystone's evil has gone too far. We must act before she curses us all." The crowd roared, some shaking fists, others looking scared. A few women clutched their children, whispering prayers. Poirot stepped forward, his small figure cutting through the noise like a knife. "Madame et messieurs," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I am Hercule Poirot, a detective. I understand your fear, but you must not let it blind you. A man is dead, and I will find the truth not with torches and shouts, but with reason." The crowd quieted, but their eyes were wary. Vicar James glared at Poirot. "This is no place for outsiders, Mr. Poirot. The village knows who's to blame." "Does it?" Poirot said, his eyes sharp. "Then why does the truth hide?" "I will find it, monsieur, and you will see it is no witch's work." The vicar's face tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot and Hastings moved through the crowd, hearing whispers of witch and curse. At the edge of the square, they saw John Harrow, the shopkeeper, watching with a grim expression. "Mr. Harrow," Poirot called, approaching him. "A word, if you please." Harrow nodded, his bushy beard bobbing. "Terrible business, this. Blackwood was a hard man, but he didn't deserve to die." "You did not like his plans to sell the land?" Poirot asked. Harrow's eyes narrowed. "No one did. That land's been in Willoughby for generations. Selling it to outsiders, zitted ruinous. But I didn't kill him, if that's what you're thinking." Poirot smiled faintly. "I think nothing yet, monsieur. I only ask questions." As they walked back to the inn, the mist thickened, wrapping the village in a grey veil. Hastings was quiet, his mind turning over the day's events. "Poirot, this is getting complicated. The diary, the pentagram, the vile dew, you think it's all connected." "Everything is connected, Hastings," Poirot said. "Like threads. In a tapestry, we must pull them carefully to see the pattern. But one thing is clear, this murder is no curse. It is the work of a clever mind, hiding behind the villagers' fear. That evening, they sat by the fire in the inn's parlour, the diary and vial on the table before them. Chapter 3. The Village Gossip. The morning air in Willoughby was crisp, with a bite that made Hercule Poirot pull his coat tighter around his small, neat frame. He stood outside the Willoughby Inn, his polished shoes gleaming on the cobblestones, his moustache perfectly curled despite the damp mist swirling around him. His sharp eyes scanned the village square, where farmers hauled carts of vegetables, women hurried with baskets, and children darted between alleys, their laughter sharp but fleeting. The village looked busy, alive, yet there was a shadow over it, a heaviness in the glances, a hush in the voices, as if everyone was waiting for something terrible to happen. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was blowing on his hands to warm them. "This village, it is like a clock wound too tight. One wrong move, and it will break apart. We must tread carefully." Hastings rubbed his hands together, his breath puffing in the cold air. "Carefully, Poirot. The whole place is ready to explode. Everyone's talking about Blackwood's murder. And that witch, Martha Greystone. I heard 2 women at breakfast say she cursed the squire's soul." Poirot's eyes twinkled, but his face was serious. "Talk Hastings, is like smoke. It spreads quickly but hides the fire. We must find the source of this fire, the truth behind the gossip. They set off toward the village shop owned by John Harrow, hoping to learn more about the squire's life and the village's secrets. The streets were narrow, lined with stone cottages, their windows glowing with soft light. But every step brought whispers, snatches of conversation from doorways, quick glances from passers-by. Words like witch, curse, and Blackwood hung in the air, sharp as frost. The shop was a small, cluttered building with a bell that jingled as they entered. Shelves were packed with jars of jam, sacks of flour, and bolts of cloth. John Harrow stood behind the counter, his bushy beard framing a stern face. He was counting coins, but his eyes flicked up when Poirot and Hastings walked in. Morning. Gentlemen, Harrow said, his voice gruff but polite. What brings you here? Not just for bread, I wager. Poirot smiled, tipping his hat. Bonjour, Monsieur Harrow. You are correct. We seek not bread, but information. About Squire Blackwood, and the talk that fills this village. Harrow's face tightened, and he set down his coins. Talk's all we've got lately. Blackwood's dead, and everyone's pointing at Martha Greystone. They say she's a witch, that she killed him with a spell. Foolishness, if you ask me, but folks are scared. Scared of what, exactly? Poirot asked, his voice gentle but probing. Harrow leaned forward, lowering his voice. It's not just Blackwood's murder. Things have been strange for months. Last spring, a farmer named Will Tate fell off his cart, broke his neck. Then, in summer, the miller's barn burned down. No one was hurt, but the village lost half its grain. Both times, people blamed Martha, said she was angry because Tate wouldn't buy her potions, and the miller called her a fraud. Hastings raised an eyebrow. And you believe this? Harrow shrugged. I believe people see what they want to see. Martha's odd lives alone makes her herbs, keeps to herself. That's enough to make folks suspicious. But Blackwood, he stirred it up. He was loud about her, saying she was dangerous, that she ought to be driven out. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Harrow's face. And you, monsieur, did you agree with the squire? Harrow hesitated, then shook his head. I didn't care for Blackwood's ways. He was rents, planning to sell our land to some London company. That land's been Willoughby's for generations. But I didn't wish him dead. Merci, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. One more question, if I may. Did you see Blackwood the night he died? Harrow's eyes narrowed. No, I was here, closing up late. Ask anyone, they'll tell you. Poirot smiled faintly. We will, monsieur. Good day. As they left the shop, the bell jingling behind them, Hastings whispered, He's hiding something, isn't he? He got all stiff when you asked about that night. Perhaps, Poirot said, his steps brisk. Or perhaps he is only nervous, like everyone in this village. We must keep asking questions, Hastings, until the pieces fit. Their next stop was the village pub, the Black Swan, a low building with smoke-stained walls and a creaky sign. Inside, it was warm and noisy, filled with farmers, labourers, and a few women sipping tea. The air smelled of ale and roasted meat, and a fire crackled in the corner. Poirot and Hastings found a table near the window, ordering tea to blend in. The pub was alive with gossip, voices overlapping like a chorus. Poirot listened, his ears sharp, catching every word. A farmer with a red face was talking loudly to his friend. It's her, I tell you. Martha Greystone's got the devil in her. Blackwood was right to call her out, And now she's got her revenge. A woman at another table shook her head. Don't be daft, Tom. Martha's just a lonely old woman. It's someone else, someone who hated Blackwood's money-grubbing ways. Like who? The farmer shot back. Carver, maybe. He's back in town, you know, and he and Blackwood were at each other's throats years ago. Poirot's eyes flicked to Hastings, who leaned closer. Carver again, Hastings whispered. That's the second time we've heard his name. Who is he? We will find out, Poirot said, sipping his tea. But listen, Hastings, there is more. A young barmaid, wiping tables nearby, paused to join the talk. I heard something odd, she said, her voice low. The night Blackwood died, someone saw a shadow near his manor. Not Martha, mind you, someone taller, moving fast. The farmer snorted. A shadow. You've been reading too many ghost stories, Nell. It's true, Nell insisted. Old Mrs. Carter saw it from a window. Said it gave her chills. Poirot made a mental note to visit Mrs. Carter. He stood, leaving coins for the tea, and gestured for Hastings to follow. Come, mon ami. This shadow interests me. They stepped back into the cold, the mist thicker now, wrapping the village in a grey haze. As they walked toward Mrs. Carter's cottage, near the church, Poirot spoke softly. Gossip, Hastings, is like a river. It carries truth and lies together. We must sift through it to find the gold. Mrs. Carter was a tiny woman with white hair and eyes like a bird's, quick and bright. Her cottage was warm, filled with the smell of baking bread. She welcomed them in, offering tea, which Poirot politely accepted this time. I heard you. Saw something the night Squire Blackwood died, Poirot said, his voice kind. A shadow, perhaps. Mrs. Carter nodded, her hands trembling slightly. I couldn't sleep that night. My knees ache when it's damp. I was at my window, looking out, and I saw it. A figure, tall and dark, moving near the manor's gate. It wasn't Martha, she's small, like me. This was someone else, hurrying away. Did you see their face? Poirot asked. No, it was too dark, she said. But they moved like they didn't want to be seen. Gave me a fright, it did. Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. A tall figure, not Martha, could it be Carver, Harrow, or someone else entirely? They left the cottage, the church bell tolling noon, its sound muffled by the fog. Their next stop was the manor, to follow up on the diary and vial from the study. Constable Gibbs met them at the gate, looking tired. Village is getting worse, he said. Folks are planning a meeting tonight, talking about driving Martha out. I don't like it, Mr. Poirot. Nor do I, Poirot said. We must work quickly, monsieur, before fear turns to violence. Inside the study, Poirot pulled out the diary, its pages crisp under his gloved fingers. He read aloud, his voice soft but clear. J. H. £5, March 1924. E.B. £10, June 1924. V.J. £3, August 1924. And here, C. Returns, danger. Hastings frowned. C. Could be Carver. But what's this about danger? Poirot tapped the page. Blackwood knew something. Hastings. These initials, these payments, they are a map of secrets, debts, blackmail. We must find out. He examined the vial again, sniffing its herbal scent. This, I believe, is from Madame Greystone. But the poison that almond-scented glass is something else. We must test both. They searched the study for more clues, finding a letter tucked inside a book. It was unsigned, written in a shaky hand. Stop the sale, or you'll pay. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A threat, Hastings. The land deal, this is important. As they left the manor, the mist had lifted slightly, but the village felt darker. They headed to the church, hoping to speak with Vicar James. The church was old, its stone walls mossy, its windows glowing with stained glass. Inside, it was quiet, the air cool and heavy with the smell of wax. Vicar James was kneeling at the altar, his thin face pale. He stood when he saw them, his eyes wary. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, what brings you here?" "The truth," Monsieur Poirot said. "Squire Blackwood is dead, and the village blames a witch. But I seek facts. What can you tell me about the squire?" The vicar's lips tightened. He was a worldly man, too focused on money. He argued with me about the church wanted to cut its funds for his land deals. I tried to guide him, but he wouldn't listen. And Martha Greystone, Poirot asked. "She's a danger," James said, his voice sharp. "Her potions, her strange ways, they're not Christian. Blackwood was right to warn against her." Poirot studied him, his eyes sharp. "And the night he died, monsieur, where were you?" The vicar flinched. "In my rectory, preparing my sermon. Alone." "Mercy," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "We will speak again. Outside," Hastings whispered. "He's awfully quick to blame Martha. And that alibi alone sounds fishy." Poirot nodded. "The vicar's heart is full of fire, Hastings. But is it faith or something else? We must watch him." The day passed in a blur of questions and whispers. They spoke to more villagers, a farmer who owed Blackwood money, a widow who blamed Martha for her cow's death, a boy who swore he saw a ghost near the manor. Each story added to the puzzle, but none made it clear. By evening they returned to the inn, tired but determined. The parlour was packed, the air thick with tension. Mrs. Dobbs rushed over, her face pale. "It's getting bad, gentlemen. They're meeting at the church tonight, talking about Martha. Some want to burn her cottage." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This must not happen, Madame Hastings. We must go to this meeting." The church was lit with lanterns, the pews filled with angry faces. Vicar James stood at the pulpit, his voice booming. "We cannot let evil live among us. Martha Greystone must answer for her crimes." The crowd shouted, some waving fists. Poirot stepped forward, his small figure commanding silence. "Madame et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I beg you, do not act in fear. A man is dead, and I will find the killer. But if you harm Madame Greystone, you may destroy the truth." The crowd murmured, some looking ashamed, others defiant. Vicar James glared, but Poirot held his gaze. "Give me time," Poirot said. "The little grey cells, they will not fail." As they left the church, the night was dark, the stars hidden by clouds. Hastings was shaken. "That was close, Poirot. They're out for blood. Fear makes monsters, Hastings," Poirot said. "But we will find the real monster, the one who killed Blackwood. Tomorrow we dig deeper." Back at the inn, they sat by the fire, the diary and letter on the table. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he turned the pages. The little grey cells. "They are working, mon ami. This diary, this threat, this shadow, they are threads in a web. And at the centre, we will find the truth." Chapter 4. The accusation. The evening sky over Willoughby was heavy with dark clouds, casting long shadows across the village square. Hercule Poirot stood on the inn's porch, his small figure wrapped in a thick coat, his moustache as neat as ever, despite the damp air. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd gathering near the church, their lanterns flickering like fireflies. The village was buzzing, voices sharp with anger and fear, all centered on one name, Martha Greystone. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was pulling on his gloves. This is a dangerous moment. Fear is like a builds slowly, then strikes without mercy. We must stop this before it destroys an innocent. Hastings frowned, his breath puffing in the cold. Innocent. Poirot, you're sure Martha didn't kill Blackwood? Everyone's pointing at Herthos. Potions, that pentagram. It's hard to argue with the village. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The village sees shadows, Hastings, not truth. My little grey cells, they tell me this murder is no witch's work. It is human, clever, calculated, and hidden behind fear. Come, we must act. They hurried toward the church, where the crowd had swollen. Men with pitchforks, women clutching shawls, even children peering from behind their parasol were shouting, their voices blending into a roar. At the center stood Vicar James, his thin face flushed, his arms raised like a preacher in a storm. Justice, he cried. Martha Greystone has brought death to our village. Squire Blackwood was struck down by her evil. We must act tonight. The crowd cheered, some yelling, burn her cottage, and drive out the witch. Poirot pushed through, his small size no match for his commanding presence. He climbed onto a bench, raising his hands for silence. Madame et messieurs, he called, his voice sharp and clear. I am Hercule Poirot, a detective known across Europe. I beg you stop this madness. You accuse Madame Greystone, but where is your proof? A man is dead, and I will find his killer, but not with tortures and shouts. Give me time, and I will bring you truth. The crowd quieted, some looking uneasy, others still angry. Vicar James glared, his eyes narrow. This is no time for outsiders. Mr. Poirot, the village knows its enemy. Does it? Poirot shot back, his gaze steady. Or does it chase shadows while the real killer laughs? I promise you, I will solve this murder. But if you harm Madame Greystone, you may hide the truth forever. Will you risk that? A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded, others muttered, but the fire in their eyes dimmed. John Harrow, the shopkeeper, stepped forward, his beard bristling. He's right, Harrow said gruffly. We don't know. For sure, it's Martha. Let the detective do his work. Vicar James opened his mouth to argue, but the crowd was shifting, their anger cooling. Poirot stepped down, his heart steady but his mind racing. Mercy, Monsieur Harrow, he whispered. You have helped more than you know. Hastings wiped his brow, his face pale. That was close, Poirot. You stopped a riot, but they're still scared. What now? Now, Poirot said, we find the truth before this storm returns. Let us visit Blackwood Manor again. There are clues we have not yet seen. They walked through the village. The streets dark and quiet now. unioncouncil.org/n-us/article/4271/willow by percent to 520 village percent to 520 which percent to 520 hunt closing parenthesis now. Their boots crunching on the gravel. The manor loomed ahead, its stone walls cold and silent under the cloudy sky. Constable Gibbs met them at the gate, his round face tired but relieved to see them. You did good back there, Mr. Poirot, Gibbs said. The village is a tinderbox. But I've got news. Mr. Carver's back in Willoughby. He's staying at the old mill house. Folks say he and Blackwood had bad blood. You think he's worth talking to? Most certainly, Poirot said, his eyes sharp. Monsieur Carver is a thread in this web. We will speak with him soon. But first, the manner. Inside Blackwood's study, the air was heavy with the memory of death. The leather chair was empty now, but the desk still held the pentagram drawing, the diary, and the faint smell of almonds from the poisoned glass. Poirot moved slowly, his gloved hands careful, his eyes scanning every corner. He paused by the fireplace, noticing a faint mark on the hearth, a smudge of soot, as if something had been dragged across it. Hastings, he said, pointing, what do you make of this? Hastings knelt, squinting. Looks like a boot mark. Maybe someone standing here, or hiding. Poi facade of Squire Blackwood's death chamber. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the study of Blackwood Manor. Hercule Poirot stood by the hearth, his sharp eyes fixed on a faint smudge of suture mark that looked like the edge of a boot, barely noticeable unless you were Roger Simpson, a black American detective who was wrongfully convicted of murder, is looking at the evidence in front of him. Hastings, standing nearby, frowned at the mark. Could it be a clue, Poirot? A footprint, perhaps? Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching. A footprint, Nan. It is no footprint, but it is strange, is it not? Hastings leaned closer, peering at the soot. Strange, yes, very strange. It could be a clue, or it could be something else. Let us examine it closely. They moved to the desk, where papers were still scattered from their last visit. Poirot picked up the small glass vial they'd found yesterday, its herbal scent faint but distinct. This, he said, holding it up, is one of Madame Greystone's tonics, I believe. But the smell, he sniffed the vial again, then set it down. It is not the same as the poison in the glass. That almond scented is different. We must send this to the chemist in town. Hastings watched, his face puzzled. Poison. You're sure? Almost certain, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. The glass on the desk had a different smell, bitter, like almonds. We will test it to be sure, but I suspect it is the poison that killed the squire. The vial, I think, is something else, something harmless. They continued their search, finding a small leather notebook tucked behind a row of books on the shelf. Poirot flipped through it, his eyes narrowing at the cryptic entries. J.H. £5, March 1924, E.B. £10, June 1924, V.J. £3, August 1924, and then a chilling note. C returns. Danger, C, Hastings said, leaning. Over Carver, perhaps. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. Or someone else. These initials, they could be anyone. We must find this Carver and speak with him. They left the study, the weight of their findings heavy in the air. As they stepped outside, the village was stirring again, the crowd from last night's meeting still lingering in the streets. Poirot led Hastings to the village in Poirot, where they planned to meet Constable Gibbs for lunch and discuss their next steps. The inn's parlour was quieter now, the morning rush of gossip over. Mrs. Dobbs greeted them, her face pale. Gentlemen, you've caused quite a stir last night. The village is still talking about that meeting. We will calm them, Madame Poirot said. But first, we must learn more about this Monsieur Carver. They sat down to a simple meal of bread and soup, the fire warming the room. Poirot's mind was elsewhere, turning over the clues, the pentagram, the diary, the vial, the poisoned glass, the soot mark, the little grey cells. Hastings, he said, tapping his temple. They are working. This is no witch's curse. This is a human crime, and I will find the hand behind it. Chapter 5. The Herbalist's Secret. The morning mist hung low over Willoughby, wrapping the village in a soft grey veil that muffled every sound. Hercule Poirot stood outside the Willoughby Inn, his small figure bundled in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly trimmed despite the damp air. His sharp eyes, bright as a bird's, scanned the quiet streets, where only a few villagers hurried past, their heads down, their whispers sharp with fear. The church bell tolled faintly in the distance, a lonely sound that seemed to echo the village's unease. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was adjusting his scarf against the chill. This village is like a locked box. The truth is inside, but we must find the key. Today we visit Madame Greystone. She holds a piece of this puzzle, I am sure. Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. Martha Greystone. Poirot, are you sure it's safe? The village thinks she's a witch. What if she's dangerous? Poirot's eyes twinkled, but his voice was firm. Dangerous, Nan, Hastings. The only danger is fear itself. Madame Greystone is no witch. She is a woman, and perhaps a victim of this village's anger. We must hear her story. They set off toward the woods, where Martha's cottage stood alone, far from the village's heart. The path was narrow, overgrown with brambles and wet with dew. The air grew colder as they walked, the trees closing in, their branches heavy with mist. Hastings glanced around nervously, half expecting a ghost to leap out. But Poirot strode forward, his steps brisk and confident. The cottage appeared through the fogger, small, sagging building with a thatched roof and ivy climbing its walls. Herbs hung in bundles outside, drying in the damp air, and a faint wisp of smoke curled from the chimney. It looked old and lonely, but not frightening, despite the villagers' tales. Poirot knocked on the door, his gloved hand firm, and after a moment it creaked open. Martha Greystone stood there, her grey hair tied back, her blue eyes sharp and wary. She was older, with lines etched deep in her face, but there was a quiet strength in her posture, like a tree that had weathered many storms. "You again," she said, her voice low but steady. "The detective and his friend, come to accuse me, like the rest." "Non, Madame," Poirot said, tipping his hat. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We come to listen, not to accuse. May we enter?" Martha hesitated, her eyes searching Poirot's face, then nodded. "Come in, but don't expect me to beg for mercy. I've done nothing wrong." Inside, the cottage was warm and cozy, the air thick with the smell of herbs and wood smoke. A fire crackled in the hearth, and shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of dried plants, bottles of tinctures, and bundles of roots. A pot simmered on the stove, giving off an earthy scent. Martha gestured to a small table where 2 wooden chairs waited. "Sit," she said. "I'll make tea, unless you're afraid I'll poison you." Hastings blushed, but Poirot smiled faintly. "Mercy, Madame, but we will decline the tea. We are here to talk about Squire Blackwood." Martha's face tightened, and she sat across from them, her hands folded in her lap. "I heard he's dead. Murdered, they say. And the village thinks I did it, with some spell or curse. Foolishness. I'm no witch, just a woman who knows herbs." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes kind but piercing. "Tell me, Madame, about your dealings with the squire. The village says he wanted you gone. Is this true? Martha nodded, her lips a thin line. He did. Blackwood came to me sometimes, asking for tonics, something to help him sleep, to ease his headaches. I gave him what he needed, nothing more. But he was a hard man, always looking for enemies. He thought my herbs were unnatural, said I was a danger to Willoughby. He stirred up the village against me. Did you argue with him? Poirot asked. Argue, Martha laughed, a bitter sound. I told him to leave me alone, but he wouldn't. Listen, he stood outside my cottage once, shouting that I'd be driven out. That was a month ago. I haven't seen him since. Hastings shifted in his chair, uneasy. But those tonics, could they have been poison? Martha's eyes flashed. My tonics, no, young man. They're herbs: chamomile, valerian, mint. They heal, not harm. If Blackwood was poisoned, it wasn't by me. Poirot pulled the small glass vial from his pocket, the one they'd found in Blackwood's study. This, Madame Du, you recognize. It. Martha took the vial, turning it in her rough hands. Yes, it's mine. A sleeping tonic I made for Blackwood. Harmless. Smell it herbs. Nothing more. Poirot sniffed the vial, nodding. It is as you say, madame. But another glass in the squire's study smelled of almonds, a sign of poison. Did Blackwood have enemies who might use such a thing? Martha's eyes darkened. Enemies, plenty. He was greedy, always raising rents, pushing folks off their land. He was planning to sell half the village to some London company. That made people angry. John Harrow, the shopkeeper, for one. And Mr. Carver, his old friend, hated him for some old betrayal. Even Lady Eleanor, his wife, wasn't happy with him, though she hides it well. Poirot's eyebrows rose. You know much, madame, for one who keeps to herself. Martha shrugged. People talk, even to me. They come for remedies, and their tongues loosen. I hear things. Mercy, Poirot said, standing. You have been most helpful. We will trouble you no more for now. As they left the cottage, the mist had thickened, turning the woods into a grey maze. Hastings was quiet, his mind turning over Martha's words. She seems honest, Poirot, but the village won't believe her. They're too scared. Fear blinds. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. But my little grey cells, they see clearly. Madame Greystone is no killer, but she knows more than she says. We must keep watching her. They returned to the village, the streets busier now as noon approached. The square was alive with chatter, and Poirot caught snippets of gossip talk, of Blackwood's murder, Martha's curse, and the mysterious Mr. Carver. They headed to the village shop to speak with John Harrow again, hoping to learn more. About the land deal, the shop was crowded, with women buying flour and men haggling over tools. Harrow stood behind the counter, his bushy beard framing a tired face. He nodded when he saw Poirot and Hastings, wiping his hands on his apron. Back again, gentlemen. What now? Monsieur Harrow, Poirot said, his voice smooth. We have spoken with Madame Greystone. She tells us of Blackwood's plan to sell the village land. You were against this, yes? Harrow's face darkened. Against it? Of course I was. That land's been ours for generations. Farms, homes, the mill. Selling it to outsiders would ruin Willoughby. Blackwood didn't care about us, only his money. And this made you angry? Poirot asked, his eyes sharp. Angry, yes, Harrow admitted, but I didn't kill him. I was in my shop the night he died, closing up. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. Poirot nodded, filing the alibi away. And Mr. Carver? We hear he and Blackwood were enemies. Harrow snorted. Enemies? That's putting it mildly. Carver and Blackwood were partners years ago in some business deal. Blackwood cheated him, left him with nothing. Carver left town, but now he's back, staying at the mill house. If anyone had a reason to hate Blackwood, it's him. Monsieur Poirot said, tipping his hat. You are most helpful. As they left the shop, the bell jingling behind them, Hastings whispered, Carver keeps coming up. Poirot, we need to find him. We will, Hastings, Poirot said. But first, we must test the vial and the poisoned glass. Let us visit the village. Doctor, perhaps he can help. They found Dr. Langley at his small clinic, a tidy building near the church. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a nervous smile, his hands always moving as if he couldn't sit still. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, he said, ushering them in. Terrible business, this murder. How can I help? Poirot held up the vial and the wrapped glass. Monsieur le Docteur, we found these in Blackwood's study. One is a tonic, we believe, from Madame Greystone. The other smells of almonds, perhaps poison. Can you test them? Langley nodded, taking the items carefully. Almonds. That could be cyanide. Deadly poison. I'll test them in my lab. Come back tomorrow, and I'll have answers. Merci, Poirot said, his eyes studying Langley's face. One more question. Did you treat Blackwood? Was he ill? Langley hesitated, his hands twitching. He came to me sometimes headaches, trouble sleeping. He was under strain, with the land deal and all. But he was healthy enough. His death, it's a shock. Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. Langley's nervousness, his quick answers there, was something off. We will return tomorrow, monsieur. As they left the clinic, the afternoon sun broke through the mist, casting weak light over the village. Poirot led Hastings to the pub, the Black Swan, to gather more gossip. The pub was warm and noisy, filled with farmers and shopkeepers nursing pints. Poirot ordered tea, his ears sharp, catching every word around them. A farmer at a nearby table was talking loudly. It's Carver, I bet. He's back, and he hated Blackwood. I saw him near the manor a week ago, skulking about. A woman shook her head. Not Carver, it's that witch, Martha. My cow stopped giving milk after I passed her cottage. She's cursed us all. Poirot leaned toward Hastings, his voice low. See, mon ami, the village spins tales, but each tale holds a grain of truth. Carver was seen near the manor, this is important. They stayed in the pub for an hour, listening. 2 stories of Blackwood's greed, Martha's spells, and Carver's return. As they left, the sky was darkening again, clouds rolling in like a warning. Poirot's mind was buzzing with clues. The vial, the poisoned glass, the diarist's cryptic notes, the soot mark, and now Carver's shadowy presence, back at the inn. They found Constable Gibbs waiting in the parlour, his face grim. Trouble's brewing, Mr. Poirot. The village is planning another meeting tonight. They're not convinced by your speech, they want Martha gone. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This must not happen, monsieur. We will attend this meeting. But first, tell me about Carver. Where is he? He's at the mill house, by the river. Gibbs said. Keeps to himself, but folks say he's bitter. He and Blackwood fell out over a land deal. 10 years ago Carver lost everything. Most interesting, Poirot said. We will visit him tomorrow, after the doctor's results. That evening, the church was packed, the air thick with anger. Vicar James stood at the pulpit, his voice booming. "We cannot wait," he shouted. "Martha Greystone is a danger. She must face justice." The crowd roared, some waving lanterns, others shouting. Poirot stepped forward, his small figure commanding silence. "Madame et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "I beg you give me one more day. I have clues, I have suspects, and I will find the truth. Do not let fear destroy an innocent." The crowd hesitated, some looking ashamed. John Harrow spoke up, his voice gruff. "Let him try. One day won't hurt." Vicar James glared, but the crowd was swaying. Poirot bowed slightly, his heart steady but his mind racing. "Mercy, I will not fail you." As they left the church, the night was cold, the stars hidden by clouds. Hastings was shaken. "You're taking a big risk." "Poirot, what if you can't solve it in a day?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The little grey cells, Hastings, they do not fail. Tomorrow we follow the threadscarver, the doctor, the diary. The truth is close, I can feel it." Back at the inn, they sat by the fire, the diary open before them. Poirot turned the pages, his eyes gleaming. JHEB, VJ, and see these initials are a map, Hastings. And this poison, this land deal, they are the roads. We are close, mon ami, very close. Chapter 6. The hidden motive. The morning sun struggled to pierce the thick mist that cloaked Willoughby, casting a pale ghostly light over the village. Hercule Poirot stood outside the Willoughby in his small frame wrapped in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly curled despite the damp air. His sharp eyes, keen as a hawk's, scanned the cobblestone streets, where villagers moved quickly, their faces tight with worry. The church bell tolled in the distance, its low hum mingling with the whispers of fear that seemed to seep from every corner of the village. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was rubbing his hands against the morning chill. "This village is like a book with torn pages. The story is there, but we must find the missing pieces. Today we dig deeper into the heart of Squire Blackwood's secrets." Hastings adjusted his scarf, his breath puffing in the cold. "Secrets. Poirot, you're sure there's more to this than Martha Greystone's potions? The village is ready to burn her cottage down." Poirot's eyes gleamed, but his voice was steady. "The village sees a witch, Hastings, because it is easier than seeing the truth. My little grey cells, they tell me this murder is about something deeper: greed, revenge, perhaps a hidden past. Come, we begin at the manor." They set off toward Blackwood Manor, their boots crunching on the gravel path. The village was waking up, but the air felt heavy, as if the mist carried the weight of Willoughby's fears. Women whispered behind their hands, men glanced over their shoulders, and children stayed close to their mothers, their games quiet and cautious. Poirot noticed every detail, the nervous glances, the hushed voices, the way the village seemed to hold its breath. The manor loomed ahead, its grey stone walls cold and silent, surrounded by tall oaks that swayed in the breeze. Constable Gibbs met them at the gate, his round face lined with exhaustion. "Morning, Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, tipping his hat. "The village is still stirred up from last night's meeting. They're giving you one day, but I don't know if they'll wait." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "We will not need more than a day, monsieur. The truth is, close eye can feel it. But first we must search the manor again. There are clues we have missed." Inside, the manor was quiet, the air thick with the smell of old wood and wax. They climbed the wide staircase to Blackwood's study, where the squire's death still lingered like a shadow. The leather chair was empty, the desk cluttered with papers, and the faint smell of almonds from the poisoned glass hung in the air. Poirot moved with purpose, his small steps silent, his gloved hands careful as he examined the room. He paused by the desk, picking up the small leather diary they'd found earlier. Its pages were filled with cryptic entries. J.H., £5, March 1924, E.B., £10, June 1924, V.J., £3, August 1924, C. Returns, danger. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read, his mind racing. Hastings, he said, holding up the diary, these initials, these payments, they are a map of secrets, debts, blackmail, or something more. We must understand what Blackwood was hiding. Hastings peered over his shoulder, frowning. J.H. could be John Harrow, E.B. might be Eleanor Blackwood, and V.J. Vicar James. But who's C? Carver, may be. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful, or perhaps another name we have not yet met. This C returns, danger, it is a warning. Blackwood knew trouble was coming. They continued their search, checking the bookshelves, the fireplace, the windows. Poirot knelt by the hearth, where the faint soot mark they'd noticed before a smudge, shaped like the edge of a boot still lingered. He ran a gloved finger over it, his brow furrowed. This mark, Hastings, it is no accident. Someone stood here, perhaps watching, perhaps hiding. Hastings shivered. Hiding, that's creepy. You think someone was in the room when Blackwood died? Possible, Poirot said, standing. Or they came after, to leave the pentagram, to make us think of witches. We must find out. Their search led them to a small drawer in the desk, one they'd overlooked before. Inside, Poirot found a folded letter, its edges worn, written in a hurried hand. You cannot sell the land. It will ruin us. Stop, or face the consequences. The letter was unsigned, but the ink matched the diary's entries. A threat, Poirot murmured, holding the letter to the light. This land deal, Hastings, it is at the heart of this mystery. Blackwood's greed made enemies, and one of them struck. Hastings nodded, his face serious. The village keeps talking about that deal. Harrow, Carver, even the vicar, they all hated it, but who'd keel over it? That, Poirot said, is what we must discover. Let us visit Dr. Langley. The results of the vial and glass may tell us more. They left the manor and headed to the village clinic, a small building with a tidy garden near the church. Dr. Langley was waiting, his thinning hair messy, his hands fidgeting as he greeted them. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, he said, his voice nervous. I've tested the items you gave me. The violet's just a herbal tonic, chamomile and valerian, like Martha Greystone said, harmless. And the glass? Poirot asked, his eyes sharp. Langley hesitated, his fingers twitching. The glass, it's cyanide, deadly. A small dose could kill in minutes, with no mark but that almond smell. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Cyanide, most interesting. And where might one find such a poison, monsieur? Langley shrugged, avoiding Poirot's gaze. It's not common, but farmers use it sometimes, for pests. Or it could come from a chemist, if someone knew how to get it. Mercy said, his voice calm but probing. And Blackwood, did he seem worried before his death? About the land deal, perhaps. He was stressed, Langley admitted. The land deal was big selling to a London company. it would have changed. Willoughby. He mentioned arguments with Harrow, Carver, even his wife. But he didn't say much. Poirot studied Langley's nervous hands, his quick glances. You were his doctor, monsieur. Did you see him the night he died? No, Langley said. Quickly, I was at home, going over patient records. My nurse, Miss Clara, can confirm it. We will speak with her, Poirot said, bowing slightly. Merci, monsieur. As they left the clinic, Hastings whispered, He's jumpy, Poirot. That alibi sounds weak, and cyanide. That's serious, very serious, Poirot said. The poison confirms this was no accident. But Langley, he hides something. We must check his alibi. Their next stop was the village pub, the Black Swan, to gather more gossip. The pub was warm, its air thick with the smell of ale and roasted meat. Farmers and shopkeepers filled the tables, their voices loud with talk of Blackwood's murder and Martha's curse. Poirot and Hastings sat near the fire, sipping tea, their ears sharp. A farmer at a nearby table was talking loudly. It's that land deal, I tell you. Blackwood was going to sell our farms to some city folk. Harrow was furious, said it'd ruin his shop. A woman nodded, her knitting needles clicking. And Carver, he's back, you know. He and Blackwood were partners once, till Blackwood cheated him. I saw Carver near the manor last week, looking angry. Poirot leaned toward Hastings, his voice low. Carver again, mon ami. His name follows us like a shadow. We must find him. They left the pub and headed to the mill house, where Carver was staying. The house stood by the river, its old stones mossy, its windows dark. Poirot knocked, and after a long wait, the door opened. Mr. Carver was a tall man, his face weathered, his eyes hard and bitter. His dark coat was patched, and his hands were rough from years of work. What do you want? Carver asked, his voice gruff. Monsieur Carver, Poirot said, tipping his hat. I am Hercule Poirot, a detective. This is Captain Hastings. We wish to speak about Squire Blackwood. Carver's eyes narrowed. He's dead. Good riddance. He cheated me 10 years ago, took my share of a business deal and left me with nothing. I've got no tears for him. Where were you the night he died? Poirot asked, his voice gentle but firm. At the mill house, Carver said. Alone, I don't mix with the village much. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Carver's face. And the land deal, did it anger you? Carver's jaw tightened. It angered everyone. Blackwood was selling Willoughby's soul. But I didn't kill him. I'm not that kind of man, Mercy, Poirot said, bowing. We may speak again. As they walked back to the village, the sky darkened, clouds rolling in like a storm. Hastings was quiet, his mind turning over. Carver's words. He's got a motive, Poirot, and no alibi. Do you think he's our man? Perhaps, Poirot said. But there are many threads in this web, Carver. Harrow, Langley, even Lady Eleanor. We must follow them all. Back at the inn, they found a new clue waiting. A note slipped under their door, written in a shaky hand. Look in Blackwood's cellar. The truth is there. It was unsigned, but the ink matched the threatening letter from the study. Hastings. Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. This is no coincidence. The cellar, we must go at once. They returned to the manor as dusk fell, the air cold and heavy. The cellar door was locked, but Gibbs had a key. Inside, the air was damp, smelling of earth and mould. Shelves held jars of preserves, old tools and dusty bottles. Poirot moved carefully, his lantern casting shadows on the stone walls. In a corner, hidden behind a barrel, he found a small wooden box, its lock broken. Inside was a bundle of paper, receipts, and a map of Willoughby's land, marked with red ink. One letter stood out, written in Blackwood's hand. "To Ebi, know your secret. Pay, or I tell." "Blackmail," Poirot whispered. Blackwood was not just greedy, he was dangerous, this Ebelana Blackwood. Chapter 7. The witch hunt intensifies. The evening air in Willoughby was thick with tension, the sky heavy with dark clouds that seemed to press down on the village. Hercule Poirot stood on the porch of the Willoughby, in his small figure wrapped in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly curled despite the damp chill. His sharp eyes scanned the village square, where lanterns flickered like angry stars, casting shadows on the cobblestone streets. A crowd was gathering near the church, their voices loud with fear and fury, all chanting one name. "Martha Greystone, mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, turning to Captain Hastings, who was pulling on his gloves, his face pale with worry. "This village, mon ami, is like a fire ready to explode. Fear has taken their hearts, and now it leads them to madness. We must stop this before it is too late." Hastings adjusted his scarf, his breath puffing in the cold. "Stop them, Poirot. They're out for blood. They think Martha killed Blackwood with some witch's curse. How can we calm a mob like that?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice steady but urgent. "With reason, Hastings. Fear blinds, but the truth shines bright. My little grey cells, they see clearly. This murder is no curse, but a human crime. We must act quickly, or Madame Greystone will pay for another's sin." They hurried toward the church, their boots crunching on the gravel path. The village was alive with anger, the air heavy with shouts and the glow of torches. Men carried pitchforks, women clutched shawls, and even children trailed behind, their eyes wide with fear and excitement. The crowd was moving toward the woods, toward Martha's cottage, their chants growing louder. "Witch, witch, burn her out." Poirot pushed through the crowd, his small size no match for his commanding presence. He climbed onto a low wall by the church, raising his hands for silence. "Madame, et messieurs," he called, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "I am Hercule Poirot, a detective known across the world. I beg you stop this madness. You accuse Madame Greystone, but you have no proof. A man is dead, and I will find his killer, but not with fire and hate. Give me time, and I will bring you justice." The crowd hesitated, their shouts fading to murmurs. Some looked ashamed, others still angry, their lanterns wavering. Vicar James stood at the front, his thin face flushed, his eyes burning with zeal. "This is no time for waiting," he shouted. "Martha Greystone is a danger to us all. Her evil took Squire Blackwood, and we must act before she curses us next." Poirot's gaze locked onto the vicar, his voice calm but firm. "Monsieur James, you speak of evil, but where is your evidence? A pentagram, a rumour. These are not proof. I have clues real, clues, and I will find the truth. But if you harm Madame Greystone, you may destroy the path to justice. Will you risk that?" A murmur ran through the crowd, some nodding, others muttering. John Harrow, the shopkeeper, stepped forward, his bushy beard bristling. "He's right," Harrow said gruffly. "We don't know for sure it's Martha. Let the detective do his work. One more day." The vicar's jaw tightened, but the crowd was swaying, their anger cooling. A woman in the back, clutching a child, spoke up. "I don't want more trouble. If he can find the killer, let him try." Poirot bowed slightly, his heart steady, but his mind racing. "Mercy, Mies Amos. I will not fail you. Return to your homes, and let reason guide us." The crowd began to disperse, their lanterns dimming as they shuffled away. Vicar James glared at Poirot, his eyes like coals, but he said nothing and stormed back into the church. Hastings let out a breath, his face pale. "That was close, Poirot. You stopped a riot, but they're still on edge." "What now?" "Now," Poirot said, stepping down from the wall, "we go to Madame Greystone. We must ensure her safety and learn more. She knows something, Hastings something she has not yet told us." They hurried through the darkening village, the mist curling around them like a living thing. The path to Martha's cottage was quiet now, the crowd's anger left behind in the square. The woods loomed ahead, their branches heavy with dew, the air cold and sharp with the smell of earth and pine. Hastings glanced around nervously, his hand in his pocket as if expecting trouble. But Poirot strode forward, his steps brisk and confident. The cottage peered through the fog, its sagging roof and ivy-covered walls glowing faintly in the lantern. Light, but something was wrong. The door was ajar, the windows dark, and the air felt heavy with menace. Poirot paused, his eyes narrowing. "Hastings," he whispered, "be ready. Something is not right." They approached cautiously, Poirot pushing the door open with his cane. Inside, the cottage was a mess, jars of herbs shattered on the floor, chairs overturned, a pot spilled across the hearth. Martha Greystone sat in a corner, her face pale, her grey hair loose around her shoulders. She held a broom like a weapon, her blue eyes wide with fear. "Madame Greystone," Poirot said, rushing to her side. "Are you hurt?" Martha shook, her head, her voice trembling. "They came, some of the village men. They broke in, shouting about the curse. I hid in the back, and they left when they heard your voice in the square. But they'll be back, I know it." Poirot's face darkened, his moustache twitching with anger. "This will not happen again, madame. I promise you, Hercule Poirot will protect you. But tell me, do you know why they are so afraid? What do they think you've done?" Martha's eyes flicked to the floor, then back to Poirot. "They think I killed Blackwood. They say my tonics were poison, that I cursed him with that pentagram. But I swear I only gave him herbs, chamomile, valerian, nothing harmful. Someone's stirring them up, making them believe I'm a witch." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "And do you know who might want Blackwood dead?" "You hear much, madame, living on the edge of the village." Martha hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice low. "Blackwood had enemies. He was greedy, always pushing, people raising rents, taking land. The land deal with the London company that made everyone angry. John Harrow, he'd lose his shop if the deal went through. Mr. Carver, he hated Blackwood for cheating him years ago. And Lady Eleanor, she and Blackwood fought more than people know. I heard her once, outside my cottage, crying about something he'd done." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Most interesting. And this pentagram, have you ever seen such a thing?" Martha shook her head. "Never. It's not my work. Someone put it there to blame me." "Mercy," Poirot said, standing. "Stay here, madame, and keep your door locked. We will return tomorrow. You are safe for now." They helped Martha clean the worst of the mess, righting chairs and sweeping up broken glass. As they left, the night was dark, the woods silent except for the rustle of leaves. Hastings was shaken, his voice low. That was awful, Poirot. They could have hurt her. Do you believe her? I believe, Poirot said, that she speaks the truth about her tonics. But she knows more than she says, Hastings. Her eyes, they hold secrets. We must keep watching her. They returned to the village. The streets empty now, the lanterns dim. At the inn, they found Constable Gibbs waiting in the parlour, his face grim. You did well at the church, Mr. Poirot, he said. But the village is still restless. And there's something else I heard from Miss Clara, Dr. Langley's nurse. She says he wasn't at home the night Blackwood died, like he claimed. He was out, but she doesn't know where. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A broken alibi. Most interesting, monsieur. We must speak with Miss Clara ourselves. But first, we return to the manor. There is more to find. They hurried to Blackwood Manor, the night air cold and heavy. Gibbs unlocked the door, and they climbed to the study, where the air still held the faint smell of almonds. Poirot moved with purpose, his lantern casting shadows on the walls. He paused by the desk, where the diary, the pentagram, and the threatening letter lay. But his eyes were drawn to a small painting on the wall, a portrait of Blackwood, stern and proud, with a faint crack in the frame. Hastings, Poirot said, pointing, help me move this. They lifted the painting, revealing a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside was a small notebook, its pages filled with more cryptic entries. J.H., payment DOEB, secret known, VJ must be stopped. C, danger near. And at the bottom, a single line, the land deal hides the truth. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Blackmail, Hastings. Blackwood was not just greedy, he was playing a dangerous game. These names, these secrets, they are the key. Hastings stared at the notebook, his face pale. Blackmail, that's a reason to kill, Poirot. But who's E.B.? Ilian or Blackwood? Perhaps, Poirot said, tucking the notebook into his pocket. Or perhaps another, we must speak with. Lady Eleanor, again. They searched the study further, finding a small key hidden under a rug, its metal worn but shiny. It didn't fit any lock in the room, but Poirot kept it, his mind turning over possibilities. This key, Hastings it, belongs to something important. A door, a box, a secret. As they left the manor, the night was deep, the stars hidden. By clouds, they returned to the inn, where the parlour was quiet, the fire low. Poirot spread the notebook, diary, and letters on the table, his eyes scanning each page. The little grey cells, they are working, mon ami, he said. Blackwood's death is tied to this land deal, these secrets. But who benefits? Who hides? Hastings yawned, rubbing his eyes. It's late, Poirot. Can't your grey cells rest for one night? Poirot chuckled, but his eyes were bright with focus. Rest, Nan, Hastings. The truth does not sleep. Chapter 8. The Vicar's Confession. The morning in Willoughby dawned cold and grey, with a thick fog that clung to the village like a heavy cloak. Hercule Poirot stood outside the Willoughby, in his small figure wrapped in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly trimmed despite the damp air. His sharp eyes, bright as a hawk's, scanned the quiet streets, where villagers moved with quick steps, their faces tight with fear and suspicion. The church bell tolled softly in the distance, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the village's unease, as if it knew the storm of anger brewing in Willoughby's heart. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was buttoning his coat against the chill. This village is like a pot ready to boil over. The fear, it grows stronger. and it points to Madame Greystone. But my little grey cells, they tell me that truth lies elsewhere in the shadows of secrets. Hastings rubbed his hands together, his breath puffing in the cold. Secrets, Poirot. You're sure it's not just Martha? The village is convinced she's a witch, and after last night's mob, I'm worried they won't wait for your truth. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice steady but urgent. The village sees what it wants to see, Hastings a witch to blame for their fears. But I see a crime, a human crime, hidden behind this talk of curses. Today, we speak with Vicar James. His words stir the village, and I think he knows more than he says. They set off toward the church, their boots crunching on the cobblestone path. The village was waking, but the air felt heavy, as if the fog carried the weight of Willoughby's anger. Women whispered behind their shawls, men glanced over their shoulders, and children stayed close to their parents, their laughter replaced by nervous glances. Poirot noticed every detail, the tight lips, the quick looks, the way the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next disaster. The church stood at the heart of the village, its stone walls covered in moss, its stained glass windows glowing faintly in the fog. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of wax and old books. Vicar James was at the altar, arranging candles, his thin face pale and his movements sharp, as if he carried a heavy burden. He looked up as Poirot and Hastings entered, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice tight. "What brings you here? Have you found the witch's guilt yet?" Poirot tipped his hat, his voice calm but probing. "Monsieur James, I seek not witches, but truth. Squire Blackwood is dead, and you have stirred the village against Madame Greystone. I wish to know why. What do you know of the squire's death?" The vicar's hands paused on a candle, his knuckles white. "I know what everyone knows. She's a danger. Her potions, her strange ways, they're not of God. Blackwood was right to warn against her, and now he's dead. It's clear, isn't it?" Poirot's eyes locked onto the vicar's, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Clear none, monsieur. Nothing is clear without proof. You speak of evil, but I see a man murdered, not cursed. Where were you the night Blackwood died?" The vicar flinched, his face paling further. "I told you, in my rectory, preparing my sermon. Alone." "Alone," Poirot repeated, his voice soft but heavy with meaning. "A convenient answer, monsieur, and yet I hear whispers that you and Blackwood argued not just about Madame Greystone, but about his land deal. Is this true?" James's lips tightened, and he looked away, his hands trembling. "We had disagreements. Blackwood was worldly, greedy. He wanted to sell the village land to outsiders to fill his pockets. I told him it was wrong, that it would ruin Willoughby, but he wouldn't listen." Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle but relentless. "And these disagreements, monsieur, they made you angry, angry enough to act." The vicar's eyes flashed, and he slammed his hand on the altar, the candles wobbling. "How dare you? I'm a man of God. I didn't kill him, if that's what you're saying." Poirot held up a hand, his expression calm. "I say nothing, monsieur. I only ask. But tell me, did you ever see Blackwood with a notebook, or letters, perhaps mentioning your name?" James froze, his face a mask of shock. For a moment, he said nothing, then his shoulders slumped, and he sank onto a pew, his voice low. "You know, don't you, about the notebook?" Hastings leaned forward, his eyes wide. "Notebook? What notebook?" Poirot pulled the small notebook from his pocket. the one they'd found behind the painting in Blackwood's study. This, monsieur. It mentions VJ, you, perhaps, and payments. What did Blackwood know about you? The vicar's face crumpled, and he buried his head in his hands. I made a mistake, he whispered. Years ago, I took money from the church funds. Not much, just enough to help my sister. She was sick, and I had no other way. Blackwood found out. He kept it in that notebook, held it over me. He said if I didn't support his plans, he'd tell the village. Blackmail, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. He used your secret to control you, and you stirred the village against Madame Greystone to please him. James nodded, tears in his eyes. I thought if I helped him, he'd keep quiet. I told the village she was a witch, spread the rumors. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't kill him, I swear. Poirot studied him, his eyes sharp but kind. I believe you, monsieur, about the murder, but your actions, they have caused harm. You must stop this witch hunt, or more will suffer. James nodded, his voice broken. I'll try. I'll tell the village to wait, to trust you. I'm sorry. Mr. Poirot, mercy, Poirot said, bowing slightly. We will speak again. As they left the church, the fog was thicker, wrapping the village in a grey haze. Hastings was stunned, his voice low. A confession, Poirot. He admitted to stealing and spreading lies about Martha. But you don't think he's the killer? Not yet, Poirot said, his steps brisk. His confession explains his actions, but not the murder. The little grey cells, they tell me the killer is more cunning. We must return to the manor. There is more to find. They hurried to Blackwood Manor, the air cold and heavy with mist. Constable Gibbs met them at the gate, his round face grim. Trouble's brewing again, Mr. Poirot. The village is restless, even after your speech. And I've got news. Miss Clara, Dr. Langley's nurse, says she saw someone near the manor the night Blackwood died. Not Martha, tall figure, moving fast. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A tall figure. This matches what Mrs. Carter saw. Did Miss Clara recognize them? Gibbs shook his head. Too dark. But she said it wasn't the vicar. He's too thin. Could be Carver or someone else. Most interesting, Poirot said. We will speak with Miss Clara soon. But first, the manor. Inside the study, the air was heavy with the memory of death. Poirot moved with purpose, his lantern casting shadows on the walls. He paused by the desk, where the diary, the threatening letter, and the blackmail notebook lay. But his eyes were drawn to a small drawer, one they'd checked before, but not thoroughly. He opened it, finding a folded letter tucked at the back, its edges worn, written in a different hand. You know my secret. Pay, or I tell the villagey bee. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, holding up the letter. Another blackmail note, Hastings, but this time Blackwood was the victim. Balana, Blackwood, or someone else. Hastings stared, his face pale, blackmail going both ways. That's twisted, Poirot. If Eleanor was blackmailing him, that's a motive for murder. Or someone else, Poirot said, tucking the letter away. We must speak with Lady Eleanor. They searched the study further, finding a small brass key hidden in a book's spine, its metal polished but old. It didn't fit the drawer or any lock in the room, but Poirot kept it, his mind racing. Another key, Hastings, like the one we found before. It belongs to something important. A box, a door, a secret. As they left the manor, the fog was lifting, but the village felt darker, the tension like a storm waiting to break. They headed to the village pub, the Black Swan, to gather more gossip. The pub was warm and noisy, filled with farmers and shopkeepers, their voices loud with talk of the murder and Martha's curse. Poirot and Hastings sat near the fire, sipping tea, their ears sharp. A farmer at a nearby table was talking loudly. "It's Carver, I bet. He's back, and he hated Blackwood. I saw him near the manor 2 nights before the murder, looking angry." A woman shook her head, her knitting needles clicking. "Not Carver, it's that witch, Martha, my neighbour's. Cow died after she passed her cottage. She's cursed us all." Poirot leaned toward Hastings, his voice low. "See, mon ami. The village spins tales, but each tale holds a clue. Carver, near the manor, this is important." They stayed in the pub for an hour, listening to stories of Blackwood's greed, Martha's spells, and Carver's bitter return. As they left, the sky was darkening, clouds rolling in like a warning. They headed to Lady Eleanor's parlour at the manor, hoping to uncover more about the blackmail note. Lady Eleanor was pale, her dark hair loose, her eyes red from crying. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice trembling. "Have you found who killed my husband?" "Not yet, madame," Poirot said, his voice gentle. "But we have found something, a letter, suggesting Blackwood was blackmailed. Do you know of this?" Her face went white, and she looked away. "Blackmail? I don't know. Thomas was a hard man, but I loved him. He never spoke of such things." Poirot's eyes studied her, noting her trembling hands. "And the land deal, madame, did it cause arguments between you?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I told him it was wrong to sell the land. It would hurt the village. But he wouldn't listen." "Merci, Poirot," said, bowing. "We will trouble you no more for now." Chapter 9. The Doctor's Alibetha. Morning fog in Willoughby was heavy, wrapping the village in a grey blanket that dulled every sound. Hercule Poirot stood outside the Willoughby Inn, his small figure bundled in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly curled despite the damp air. His sharp eyes, bright as a bird's, scanned the cobblestone streets, where villagers moved with quick, nervous steps, their faces tight with fear. The church bell tolled faintly, its low hum mingling with the whispers of suspicion that seemed to rise from every corner of the village. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was pulling his scarf tighter against the chill. "This village is like a puzzle with missing pieces. Each clue we find brings us closer, but the picture is still hidden. Today we speak with Dr. Langley. His alibi, it is weak, and I think he knows more than he says." Hastings rubbed his hands together, his breath puffing in the cold. "Langley. Poirot, you're sure he's involved? He's just a nervous doctor. But that cyanide, could he have gotten it? And what about the vicar's confession yesterday?" My head's spinning. Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice calm but firm. "The head spins when the truth is near, Hastings. Vicar James admitted to spreading lies about Madame Greystone, but he is not the killer. My little grey cells, they point to a more cunning mind. Dr. Langley's broken alibi is a thread we must pull. Come, we begin at the clinic." They set off toward the village clinic, their boots crunching on the gravel path. The village was waking, but the air felt heavy, as if the fog carried the weight of Willoughby's anger. Women whispered behind their hands, men cast quick glances, and children stayed close to their mothers, their games quiet and cautious. Poirot noticed every detail, the tight smiles, the nervous eyes, the way the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next spark to ignite its fear. The clinic was a small, tidy building near the church, its garden neat despite the damp. Dr. Langley was inside, sorting papers at his desk, his thinning hair messy, his hands fidgeting as always. He looked up when Poirot and Hastings entered, his nervous smile faltering. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice shaky. "Back again? Have you found the killer?" "Not yet," Monsieur Poirot said, tipping his hat. "But we are close. We wish to speak about your alibi, Doctor. You said you were home the night Squire Blackwood died, but your nurse, Miss Clara, says otherwise. Where were you?" Langley's hands froze, his face paling. "Miss Clara, she's mistaken. I was home, going over patient records. It was late. I must have been alone when she checked." Poirot's eyes locked onto Langley's, his gaze sharp but kind. "Alone, monsieur. A convenient answer, but not a strong one. Miss Clara says you were out, and another witness saw a tall figure near the manor that night. Could that have been you?" Langley's hands twitched, and he looked away, his voice rising. "Me? Near the manor? That's absurd. I'm a doctor, not a murderer. I had no reason to kill Blackwood." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. "No reason. Blackwood was planning to sell the village land a deal that would change Willoughby. Did this anger you, monsieur? Or did Blackwood know something about you, perhaps written?" In his notebook, Langley's face went white, and he sank into his chair, his hands trembling. "Notebook? I don't know what you mean. I was against the land deal, yes. It would have hurt the village, my patients, my home. But I didn't kill him, I swear." Poirot pulled the blackmail notebook from his pocket, holding it up. "This, monsieur, mentions JHEB, VJ, and others. Could there be an L for Langley? What did Blackwood know?" Langley shook his head, his voice desperate. "Nothing. He knew nothing about me. I'm just a doctor, trying to help this village. You have to believe me." Poirot studied him, his eyes narrowing. "For now, monsieur, I believe you did not kill, but your alibi, it is weak, and I will check it. Tell me, where might one find cyanide, the poison that killed Blackwood?" Langley swallowed hard, his fingers drumming on the desk. "Cyanide, it's used for pests, sometimes by farmers, or in a chemist's shop, if someone knew how to get it. I don't keep it here, too dangerous." "Merci," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "We will speak again, and we will speak with Miss Clara." As they left the clinic, the fog was thinning, but the village felt darker, the tension like a storm waiting to break. Hastings was shaken, his voice low. "He's hiding something, Poirot. That alibi's as flimsy as paper, and cyanide. Knew too much about it. We," Poirot said, his steps brisk. "Langley is nervous, but is it guilt or fear? We must find Miss Clara and confirm his story. But first, we return to the manor. There are clues we have not yet seen." They hurried to Blackwood Manor, the air cold and heavy with the scent of damp earth. Constable Gibbs met them at the gate, his round face grim. "Morning, gentlemen," he said. "The village is still talking about last night's mob. They're giving you time, but not much. And I've got news. Miss Clara's at the clinic today. She's nervous, but she'll talk." "Excellent," Poirot said. "We will see her soon. But first, the manor." Inside the study, the air was thick with the memory of death. Poirot moved with purpose, his lantern casting shadows on the walls. He paused by the desk, where the diary, the blackmail notebook, and the threatening letter lay. But his eyes were drawn to a small bookshelf, one they'd checked before, but not thoroughly. He pulled out a heavy book, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a single letter, its edges worn, written in a shaky hand. "You must stop the sale, or you will pay with your life." "Hastings," Poirot said, holding up the letter, "another threat. The handwriting it is different from the others, but the ink matches the blackmail note. This land deal, it is the heart of this mystery." Hastings stared, his face pale. "Another threat, Poirot. This is getting deeper. Who wrote it?" "Langley." "Carver." "Eleanor." "We will find out," Poirot said, tucking the letter away. They searched further, finding a small brass locket hidden in a drawer, its surface engraved with a rose. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, her face unfamiliar but striking. "A locket," Poirot murmured. "This is not Lady Eleanor's face." "Whose is it, Hastings? A secret love, perhaps?" Hastings frowned. "A love affair. That's a motive, Poirot. If Blackwood was hiding a mistress, Eleanor might have been furious." "Possible," Poirot said. "We must show this to Lady Eleanor." They left a manor and headed to the clinic. To find Miss Clara. The fog had lifted slightly, but the village was tense, with villagers whispering in doorways and glancing at the woods where Martha's cottage stood. At the clinic, Miss Clara was waiting, a young woman with nervous eyes and a tight bun. She led them to a small room, her hands twisting her apron. "Miss Clara," Poirot said, his voice gentle, "you told Constable Gibbs that Dr. Langley was not home the night Squire Blackwood died. Is this true?" She nodded, her voice low. "Yes, sir. He said he was home, but I stopped by to drop off some papers around 9 o'clock. The house was dark, and he didn't answer. I don't know where he was." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did you see anyone near the manor that night? A tall figure, perhaps?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I did, sir. On my way home, I passed the manor. It was dark, but I saw some tall man moving fast near the gate. I couldn't see his face, but it wasn't Dr. Langley. He's not that tall." "Merci," Poirot said, bowing. "You have been most helpful." As they left the clinic, Hastings whispered, "Another tall figure. That rules out Langley, but who is it?" "Carver's tall, isn't he?" Poirot said, "but we must not assume. The little grey cells, they need more. Let us visit Mr. Carver." They headed to the mill house, where Carver was staying. The house stood by the river, its stones mossy, its windows dark. Poirot knocked, and Carver opened the door, his weathered face hard, his eyes bitter. "You again," he said, his voice gruff. "What now?" "Monsieur Carver," Poirot said, "we have questions about the night Blackwood died. You were seen near the manor. Why?" Carver's jaw tightened. "I wasn't there. I was here, alone. Whoever says they saw me is lying." "And the land deal?" Poirot asked. "It angered you, yes. Blackwood cheated you years ago. Did you seek revenge?" Carver's eyes flashed. "I hated him, yes. He ruined me, but I didn't kill him. I'm not a murderer." Poirot studied him, then nodded. "Merci, monsieur. We will speak again." As they walked back to the village, the sky darkened, clouds rolling in like a storm. Hastings was quiet, his mind racing. "Carver's got no alibi, Poirot, and he's tall could be our man." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but the locket, the letter, the cyanide, these point to a deeper motive. Let us speak with Lady Eleanor." They returned to Blackwood Manor, where Lady Eleanor was in her parlour, pale and fragile. Poirot showed her the locket, watching her face. "Madame, do you know this?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. "No, I've never seen it. It's not mine." Poirot noted her trembling hands. "And the land deal, madame, did it cause fights with your husband?" "Yes," she admitted, her voice low. "I told him it was wrong, but he didn't care." "Mercy," Poirot said, bowing. "We will trouble you no more for now." Back at the inn, they found a new clue. A note slipped under their door, written in a shaky hand. "Look in the Manor's attic. The truth is there." It was unsigned, but the ink matched the threatening letter. "Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "This is no coincidence. Tomorrow we search the attic, and we check Langley's records, and Carver's past." Chapter 10. The Attic's Secret. The morning in Willoughby was cold and grey, with a thick fog that hung over the village like a heavy curtain. Hercule Poirot stood outside the Willoughby, in his small figure wrapped in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly curled despite the damp air. His sharp eyes, bright as a hawk's, scanned the cobblestone streets, where villagers moved with hurried steps, their faces tight with fear and whispers. The church bell tolled softly in the distance, its mournful sound blending with the murmurs of suspicion that seemed to rise from every corner of the village. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was pulling his scarf tight against the chill. "This village is like a tangled web, and we are close to finding the spider. The note we found last night, it points us to the Manor's attic. Today we uncover its secret." Hastings rubbed his hands together, his breath puffing in the cold. "The attic, Poirot. That note could be a trap. The village is still angry about Martha Greystone, and now we're chasing another clue. What about Dr. Langley's alibi or Carver's motive?" My head's spinning. Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice calm but urgent. "The head spins when the truth is near, Hastings. Langley's alibi is weak, Carver's anger is real, but this noted is a new thread in our web. The attic holds something important. I feel it in my little grey cells. Come, we must hurry." They set off toward Blackwood Manor, their boots crunching on the gravel path. The village was stirring, but the air felt heavy, as if the fog carried the weight of Willoughby's fear. Women whispered behind their shawls, men cast nervous glances, and children clung to their parents, their games silenced by the villagers' tension. Poirot noticed every detail, the quick looks, the hushed voices, the way the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for another spark to ignite its anger. The manor loomed ahead, its grey stone walls cold and silent, surrounded by tall oaks that swayed in the breeze. Constable Gibbs met them at the gate, his round face lined with worry. "Morning, Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, tipping his hat. "The village is still restless after that mob 2 nights ago. They're giving you time, but it's running out. Any luck with the clues?" Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "We are close, monsieur. Last night we found a note directing us to the Manor's attic. We must search it now." Gibbs raised an eyebrow. "The attic, that's a dusty old place, but I've got the key. Let's go." Inside, the manor was quiet, the air thick with the smell of old wood and wax. They climbed the wide staircase, then a narrower set of steps to the attic door, its wood warped and creaky. Gibbs unlocked it, and the door groaned open, revealing a dark, dusty space filled with cobwebs, old furniture, and stacks of crates. The air was musty, and a single window let in a sliver of grey light. Casting long shadows across the floor, Poirot moved with purpose, his lantern lighting the way, his sharp eyes scanning every corner. "Hastings," he said, "look for anything unusual, a box, a letter, something hidden." The note said, "The truth is here." They searched carefully, sifting through dusty trunks and piles of old clothes. Hastings coughed, waving away cobwebs, while Poirot's gloved hands moved with precision, checking under floorboards and behind crates. Near the window, tucked behind a broken chair, Poirot found a small wooden chest, its lock rusted but intact. The brass key they'd found in the study fit perfectly, and with a soft click, the chest opened. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon, and a small leather journal, its pages yellowed. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he untied the letters, reading the first one aloud. "My dearest Thomas, you must leave her. We can be together, but only if you act." "M," Hastings gasped, his eyes wide. "M, Poirot, that's not Martha Greystone. Is it a love affair?" Poirot shook his head, his voice thoughtful. "Nan, Hastings, this is not Madame Greystone's hand, but a love affair. This is a motive. Blackwood had a secret, and someone else knew it." He flipped through the journal, finding entries dated years ago. "M begs me to leave Eleanor. I cannot, she would ruin me. The land deal must go through to secure my future." Hastings stared, his face pale. "Ruin him, Poirot, this is huge. If Eleanor found out about this affair, she'd have reason to kill him, or this M whoever." "She is." Poirot nodded, tucking the letters and journal into his coat. "We must find this M, Hastings. But there is more here." He searched the chest further, finding a small vial, empty but with a faint herbal scent, and a folded map of Willoughby's land, marked with red ink showing the areas Blackwood planned to sell. "This map," Poirot said, holding it up, "it confirms the land deal's importance. And this violet is like Madame Greystone's, but empty. A clue or a trick." They left the attic, the weight of their findings heavy. As they descended to the manor's hall, they heard a soft noise, a creak from the study. Poirot held up a hand, signalling silence, and they crept toward the door. Inside, they found Lady Eleanor, her face pale, her hands rifling through the desks, papers. "Madame Blackwood," Poirot said, his voice calm but sharp. "What do you seek?" Eleanor gasped, dropping a letter. "Mr. Poirot, I was just looking for Thomas's will. With all this talk of the land deal, I thought it might be here." Poirot's eyes narrowed, picking up the letter she'd dropped. It was another threat, in the same shaky hand as the attic note. "Stop the sale, or you'll regret it." He held it up, watching her face. "This, Madame, is it yours?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, I've never seen it. I swear I only wanted the will." Poirot studied her, noting her trembling hands. "And this locket," he said, pulling the brass locket from his pocket. "Do you know it?" Eleanor's face went white, and she looked away. It's not mine. I don't know whose it is." "Mercy," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "We will speak again, Madame." As they left the manor, Hastings whispered, "She's lying, Poirot." That locket shook her up, and she was searching for something. Could she be M? "Possible," Poirot said, his steps brisk. "But we must not assume. Let us visit Miss Clara at the clinic. Her story about Dr. Langley may tell us more." They headed to the village clinic, the fog lifting slightly, but the air still cold. Miss Clara was there, her nervous eyes darting. As she greeted them, "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, twisting her apron. "I told Constable Gibbs what I saw. Dr. Langley wasn't home that night, and I saw a tall figure near the manor." Poirot nodded, his voice gentle. "And this figure, mademoiselle, could it have been Mr. Carver?" Clara hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know. It was too dark. But it wasn't Dr. Langley. He's not that tall," Mercy Poirot said. "And tell me, did Dr. Langley ever speak of Blackwood or the land deal?" Clara nodded, her voice low. "He was upset about it. Said it would ruin the village, hurt his patients. He argued with Blackwood once, in this very clinic, about a month ago." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. Did he ever mention a woman, perhaps someone close to Blackwood?" Clara frowned, thinking. "No, but I heard Blackwood once, when he came for a headache remedy. He was muttering about someone, a woman who was trouble. I didn't catch a name." "Mercy," Poirot said, bowing, "you have been most helpful." As they left the clinic, the village was buzzing with gossip. They stopped at the Black Swan pub to listen, the air warm with the smell of ale and roasted meat. Farmers and shopkeepers filled the tables, their voices loud with talk of the murder and Martha's curse. A woman at a nearby table was saying, "It's that Carver, he's back, and he hated Blackwood. I saw him near the manor days before the murder, looking sneaky." Another man shook his head. "Not Carver, it's the witch. My crops failed after she walked by my field. She's cursed us all." Poirot leaned toward Hastings, his voice low. "The village spins tales, mon ami, but each tale holds a clue. Carver near the manor, a woman troubling Blackwood. We are close." They left the pub and headed to the mill house to confront Carver again. The house was dark, its windows like empty eyes. Carver answered the door, his weathered face hard, his eyes bitter. "What now?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Monsieur Carver," Poirot said, "we have found letters suggesting Blackwood had a secret, a woman, perhaps. Do you know of this?" Carver's jaw tightened. "A woman? No, but Blackwood was a snake, cheated me, cheated others. Wouldn't surprise me if he had secrets." "And the night he died?" Poirot asked. "You were seen near the manor." Carver's eyes flashed. "I told you I was here. Whoever says otherwise is lying." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Carver's face. "Merci, monsieur." As they walked back to the village, the sky darkened, clouds heavy with the promise of rain. Hastings was quiet, his mind racing. "Carver's got no alibi, Poirot, and he's tall, and that locket, who's the woman?" "The woman," Poirot said, "is the key. Not Madame Greystone, but another. We must find her." Back at the inn, they found a new clue. A note slipped under their door, written in a neat hand. "Ask about the miller's wife. She knows." It was unsigned, but the ink was different from the others. "Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The miller's wife, this is new. Tomorrow we find her, and we search Langley's records. The little grey cells, they are close to the truth. They sat by the fire, the letters, journal, locket, and notes spread before them." Poirot's eyes scanned each clue, his mind racing. "The web is tightening, mon ami. A love affair, blackmail, a land deal. These are the threads. Soon we will catch the killer." Chapter 11. The miller's wife. The morning fog in Willoughby was dense, cloaking the village in a grey shroud that softened every sound. Hercule Poirot stood outside the Willoughby in his small figure wrapped in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly curled despite the damp chill. His sharp eyes, keen as a hawk's, scanned the cobblestone streets, where villagers moved with quick, nervous steps, their faces tight with fear and suspicion. The church bell tolled faintly, its low hum blending with the whispers of gossip that seemed to rise from every corner of the village. Mon ami Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was adjusting his scarf against the cold. This village is like a tapestry with hidden stitches. The note about the miller's wife, it is a new thread we must follow. Today we uncover her secret, and perhaps the heart of this mystery. Hastings rubbed his hands together, his breath puffing in the cold air. The miller's wife, Poirot. That note could be another trick. The village is still buzzing about Martha Greystone, and now we're chasing a new lead. What about the locket or Dr. Langley's alibi? I can't keep up. Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice calm but urgent. The puzzle grows complex, Hastings, but that is when the truth draws near. The locket, Langley's alibi, Carver's motives are all pieces, but the miller's wife may hold the key. My little grey cells, they are working. Come, we begin at the mill. They set off toward the mill, their boots crunching on the gravel path that wound through the village. The air was heavy, as if the fog carried the weight of Willoughby's fear. Women whispered behind their hands, men cast wary glances, and children stayed close to their parents, their laughter replaced by nervous looks. Poirot noticed every detail, tight smiles, the quick glances, the way the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for another spark to ignite its anger. The mill stood by the river, its old stone walls covered in moss, its great wheel creaking softly as the water flowed. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the air smelled of damp wood and grain. Poirot knocked on the door of the miller's house, a small cottage attached to the mill, and after a moment it opened. Mrs. Agnes Miller stood there, a stout woman with greying hair and tired eyes, her apron dusted with flour. She looked wary, her hands wiping nervously on her skirt. "Good morning, madame," Poirot said, tipping his hat. "I am Hercule Poirot, a detective, and this is Captain Hastings. We wish to speak with you about Squire Blackwood's death. May we come in?" Agnes hesitated, her eyes flicking between them, then nodded. "All right, but I don't know much." "Come in." Inside, the cottage was warm, the air thick with the smell of fresh bread and wood smoke. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a wooden table held a loaf of bread and a teapot. Agnes gestured to 2 chairs, her movements stiff. "Sit, if you like. What's this about the squire?" Poirot sat, his sharp eyes studying her face. "Madame Miller, we found a note suggesting you know something about Blackwood's death. What can you tell us?" Agnes's face paled, her hands twisting her apron. "A note? I don't know what you mean." "I'm just a miller's wife. My husband runs the mill, and I keep the house. I had nothing to do with the squire." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "Nothing, madame. Blackwood was planning to sell the village land, including the mill. Did this not anger you?" Agnes's lips tightened, and she looked away. "It angered everyone. The mill's been in my husband's family for generations. If Blackwood sold it, we'd lose everything. But that's no reason to kill." Poirot pulled the brass locket from his pocket, holding it up. "And this, Madame Du, you recognize it?" Agnes's eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Where did you get that?" It's mine. I lost it years ago." Hastings leaned forward, his eyes wide. "Yours, Poirot. This is the locket from the study." Poirot's gaze never left Agnes's face. "Yours, madame. And the photograph inside a young woman. Is it you? Agnes nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, it's me, when I was younger. I wore that locket every day, until I lost it. Or thought I did. How did it end up with Blackwood? Poirot's voice was soft but relentless. Perhaps you gave it to him, madame. We found letters in the manor's attic, signed M. They speak of love, of asking Blackwood to leave his wife. Are you this M? Agnes's face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, tears welling in her eyes. Oh God, yes, it's true. Years ago, when I was young, I loved Thomas Blackwood. We met in secret. He promised to leave Eleanor to marry me. But he lied. He said he couldn't leave her, that she'd ruin him. I ended it, and I never spoke to him again. I swear I didn't kill him. Hastings stared, his mouth open. A love affair. Poirot, this changes everything. If Eleanor found out, or if Blackwood threatened to tell. Poirot held up a hand, his eyes still on Agnes. Madame, where were you the night Blackwood died? Agnes wiped her eyes, her voice steadying. Here, with my husband. We were in bed early. He'd been working late at the mill. You can ask him. And this land deal? Poirot asked. Did your husband know of your past with Blackwood? She shook her head. No, I never told him. It was over long ago. Poirot nodded, tucking the locket away. Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. We may speak again. As they left the cottage, the fog was thinning, but the air felt heavier, as if the truth was pressing down on them. Hastings was stunned, his voice low. Agnes Miller and Blackwood. Poirot, that's a motive for murder. Her husband, the miller, could he have found out? Possible, Poirot said, his steps brisk. But we must not assume. The little grey cells, they need more. Let us visit the miller, and then Dr. Langley's records. They knocked on the mill's door, and Mr. Miller, a burly man with flour-dusted hair, greeted them. What's this? He asked, his voice gruff. You're that detective, aren't you? Oui, Monsieur Poirot said. I am Hercule Poirot. We wish to ask about the night Squire Blackwood died. Where were you? Miller frowned, wiping his hands on his apron. Here, working late. Then home with Agnes, in bed by 9. Why? And the land deal? Poirot asked. It threatened your mill, yes. Miller's face darkened. It did. Blackwood wanted to sell everything, our mill, our home. I hated him for it, but I didn't kill him. Poirot nodded, his eyes sharp. Merci, monsieur. As they left the mill, Hastings whispered, He's got a motive, Poirot. And his tool could be the figure Clara saw near the manor. Perhaps, Poirot said, but we must check his alibi. Let us go to the clinic. They headed to the village clinic, where Dr. Langley was sorting medicines, his hands fidgeting, as always. He looked up, his nervous smile faltering. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, he said. What now? Monsieur Langley, Poirot said. We wish to see your records from the night Blackwood died, and we have questions about cyanide. Langley's face paled, his hands twitching. Records? I keep them here, and cyanide told you I don't have it. Farmers might, or a chemist. Poirot's eyes narrowed. We will see the records, monsieur. Langley led them to a small office, where a ledger lay open. Poirot scanned the pages, noting no entries for the night of the murder. You saw no patients that night, monsieur? No, Langley said quickly. I was home or out, briefly, on a walk. I told you. Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. He noticed a torn receipt on the desk, its edges frayed, with the word chemist scrawled on it. "This, monsieur, what is it?" Langley grabbed it, his voice rising. "Nothing, just a supply order. You're wasting time. Mercy." Poirot said, bowing. "We will return." As they left the clinic, Hastings whispered, "That receipt, Poirot, could it be for cyanide?" "Possible," Poirot said. "We must check the chemist. But first, we visit Lady Eleanor." They returned to Blackwood Manor, where Lady Eleanor was in her parlour, pale and fragile. Poirot showed her the letters signed M. Madame. "Do you know of a woman in your husband's life?" Eleanor's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, Thomas was faithful, or so I thought. I don't know any M." Poirot watched her trembling hands. "And the land deal, Madame, did it cause fights?" "Yes," she admitted, her voice low. "I told him it was wrong, but he wouldn't listen." "Mercy," Poirot said, bowing. "We will speak again." As they left the manor, the sky darkened, clouds heavy with rain. They stopped at the chemist's shop, a small building near the square. The chemist, an old man with spectacles, confirmed no cyanide sales to Langley, but admitted farmers sometimes bought it for pests. Back at the inn, they found a new clue. A note slipped under their door, written in a neat hand. "Check the mill's storage shed." The truth is there. It was unsigned, but the ink matched the miller's wife note. "Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming, "this is no coincidence. Tomorrow we search the shed, and we check Miller's alibi and Langley's chemist. The truth is close." They sat by the fire, the letters, journal, locket, and notes spread before them. Poirot's eyes scanned each clue, his mind racing. The little grey cells, they are working. Mon ami, a love affair, blackmail, cyanide. These are the threads. Soon, we will catch the killer. Chapter 12. The killer unmasked. The morning fog in Willoughby had lifted at last, leaving a clear, crisp sky that bathed the village in pale sunlight. Hercule Poirot stood outside the Willoughby Inn, his small figure wrapped in a neatly pressed coat, his moustache perfectly curled despite the early chill. His sharp eyes, bright as a hawk's, scanned the cobblestone streets, where villagers moved cautiously, their faces still tight with fear but softened by a glimmer of hope. The church bell tolled softly, its sound no longer mournful but steady, as if signalling the end of a long nightmare. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Captain Hastings, who was adjusting his scarf with a nervous energy. "Today is the day. Hastings, the little grey cells, they have worked tirelessly, and now the puzzle is complete. We will gather the village, reveal the killer, and end this witch hunt for good." Hastings rubbed his hands together, his breath puffing in the cold. "The killer, Poirot, you figured it out. Is it Carver, Dr. Langley, the miller's wife? My head's been spinning with all these clues, the locket, the blackmail notes, the cyanide." Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice calm but firm. "The head spins when the truth is near, Hastings. The locket, the notes, the cyanide, these are the threads of a tangled web, and today we unravel it. Come, we go to the mill's storage shed, as the note suggested. Then we call the village to the church." They set off toward the mill, their boots crunching on the gravel path that wound through the village. The air was lighter now, but the tension lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Villagers watched from doorways, whispering about Martha Greystone, the land deal, and the mysterious notes that had spread fear. Poirot noticed every detail, the cautious glances, the hushed voices, the way the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the truth. The mill stood by the river, its great wheel creaking softly, its stone walls mossy and worn. The storage shed was a small, weathered building behind the mill, its door locked with a rusty padlock. Poirot pulled out the brass key they'd found in the study, and with a soft click, the lock opened. Inside, the shed was dark, smelling of grain and damp wood. Sacks of flour lined the walls, and old tools hung on rusty hooks. Poirot moved with purpose, his lantern casting shadows, his sharp eyes scanning every corner. "Hastings," he said, pointing to a stack of crates. "Help me move these." They shifted the crates, revealing a small wooden box hidden beneath a sack. Poirot opened it, finding a glass bottle, its label faded but readable. Cyanide for pest control. Beside it was a folded letter, its handwriting matching the threatening notes. "You'll pay for what you did, Thomas." "No one will know," Hastings gasped, his eyes wide. "Cyanide. Poirot, this is the murder weapon. And that note, who wrote it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed as he tucked the bottle and letter into his coat. "The final piece, Hastings. The little grey cells, they see the picture now, but we must act quickly. Let us gather the village at the church." They hurried to the church, where Constable Gibbs was waiting, his round face anxious. "Mr. Poirot, the village is restless," he said. "They're talking about another meeting tonight, about Martha. Can you stop them?" "I will do more than stop them," Monsieur Poirot said. "I will give them the truth. Send word everyone must come to the church at noon. The killer will be unmasked." Gibbs nodded, rushing off to spread the message. Poirot and Hastings returned to the inn to prepare, the weight of their findings heavy. Poirot spread the clues. On the table, the diary, the blackmail notebook, the locket, the letters, the map, the vial, and now the cyanide bottle. "The web is complete, Hastings," he said. "Each clue points to one person, one motive. You will see, at noon." The church was packed, the pews filled with villagers, their faces a mix of fear, anger, and curiosity. Vicar James stood at the pulpit, his thin face pale, his hands trembling. Lady Eleanor sat in the front, her eyes red from crying. Dr. Langley was there, his hands fidgeting. Mr. and Mrs. Miller stood near the back, their faces tight. Mr. Carver leaned against a wall, his eyes hard. Martha Greystone was absent, safe in her cottage under Gibbs's protection. The air was thick with tension, the villagers whispering, their lanterns casting flickering shadows. Poirot stepped forward, his small figure commanding silence. "Madame, et messieurs," he said, his voice clear and sharp, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have promised you the truth. Squire Blackwood was murdered, not by a witch's curse, but by a human hand. Today I revealed that hand." The crowd murmured, some leaning forward, others gripping their seats. Poirot held up the diary. "This diary lists initials JHEB. VJC Blackwood was blackmailing people, using their secrets to control them. Vicar James, you admitted to stealing church funds, but you are not the killer." James bowed his head, his face flushed with shame. The crowd gasped, but Poirot continued. "The locket, found in the study, belonged to Mrs. Agnes Miller. She loved Blackwood years ago, a secret he held over her. But she, too, is not the killer." Agnes clutched her husband's arm, tears in her eyes. Mr. Miller's face darkened, but he stayed silent. Poirot held up the threatening letter. This letter warned Blackwood to stop the land deal. It was written by someone desperate, someone who stood to lose everything. He turned to the cyanide bottle, his eyes gleaming. And this, found in the mill's shed, is the poison that killed Blackwood. Cyanide, deadly and quick, with the smell of almonds. But who had access to it? Who had motive? The crowd was silent now, hanging on his words. Poirot's gaze swept the room, then settled on Dr. Langley. Monsieur Langley, your alibi for the night of the murder is false. Miss Clara saw you were not home, and we found a receipt in your office hinting at a chemist's order. You knew. Of cyanide, yes. Langley's face went white, his hands shaking. I didn't kill him. I was out walking, yes, but not at the manor, I swear. Poirot nodded, then turned to Lady Eleanor. Madame Blackwood, you fought with your husband over the land deal. And this letter, signed E.B., it suggests you blackmailed him, perhaps knowing of his affair with Agnes Miller. Eleanor gasped, her hands trembling. I didn't. I loved Thomas, even if he was cruel. I didn't write that. Poirot's eyes moved to Mr. Carver. Monsieur Carver, you hated Blackwood for cheating you years ago. You were seen near the manor, and you were tall, like the figure spotted that night. Did you seek revenge? Carver's eyes flashed. I hated him, yes, but I didn't kill him. I was at the mill house. The crowd murmured, tension rising. Poirot raised a hand for silence. Mies Amos, the killer, is clever, hiding behind fear and lies. The pentagram in the study was a trick, meant to blame Madame Greystone. The cyanide, the blackmail, the land deal, these point to one person, one motive. He paused, his eyes locking onto Mr. Miller. Monsieur Miller, you had the strongest motive. The land deal threatened your mill, your family's legacy. You knew of your wife's past with Blackwood, perhaps. He taunted you with it. The cyanide was found in your shed, and you are tall, matching the figures seen near the manor. You wrote the threatening notes, yes. Miller's face went red, his fists clenching. That's a lie. I didn't kill him. I was home with Agnes. Agnes gasped, her hand on his arm. Henry, tell them the truth. Miller's shoulders slumped, and he looked down, his voice breaking. All right, I did it. Blackwood was going to sell the mill, ruin us. And he told me about Agnes. Laughed in my face, said she'd always love him. I couldn't take it. I got cyanide from a farmer friend, slipped it into his drink at the manor. I drew the pentagram to blame the witch. I'm sorry, Agnes. The crowd gasped, some shouting, others crying. Gibbs stepped forward, his face grim. Henry Miller, you're under arrest. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm. Madame et messieurs, the truth is found. Madame Greystone is no witch, she is a victim of fear. Let this be a lesson. Fear blinds, but reason sees. Go home and let Willoughby heal. The crowd dispersed, some ashamed, others relieved. Vicar James promised to calm the village, his voice soft with guilt. Lady Eleanor wept, her secrets laid bare. Agnes clung to her husband, tears streaming down her face. Carver nodded to Poirot, a grudging respect in his eyes. As they left the church, the sun was high, casting a warm glow over Willoughby. Hastings was stunned, his voice low. You did it, Poirot. You found the killer. But how did you know it was Miller? Poirot smiled, tapping his temple. The little grey cells, Hastings, the cyanide in the shed, the handwriting on the notes, Miller's motive, all fit. Blackwood's greed and cruelty made enemies, but Miller's love for his wife and fear for his mill drove him to murder. Back at the inn, they packed their bags, the case solved. Martha Greystone was safe, her cottage untouched, and the village was quiet, its fear fading like the fog. Poirot looked out at the streets, his eyes bright. The truth, mon ami, it is like sunlight, tit reveals all. Now, let us return to London. Hastings grinned, shaking his head. You're a marvel, Poirot. I'll never doubt your grey cells again. Poirot chuckled, his moustache twitching. Never say never, Hastings. The little grey cells, they are always ready for the next puzzle.